Live here, Infinite Plane Radio, 227, 2026. Kind of open topics tonight. I'm just going to see where the chat is at. I sent out a newsletter. So if you got that, you should have been expecting this. I've been out of the office for the last few days, doing some field research, among other things. Mostly, I'm going through my stash of notebooks and manuscripts to see what is something I could bring into publication ready status within the next couple of months. And I've narrowed it down to a few projects, not related to this directly, but I used to have a pretty significant, well, I had a royalty stream that allowed me to essentially focus on other things because it constitutes a passive income. And I need to build that back up. And so that's the plan. I see it just taking about 3 months. What's up, Travis Brannon, Absent Bias. And so the 22nd of this month, 2/22, was the anniversary of the final launch of Mad Mike Hughes, who was a friend of the channels. We had this project. We financed this steam-powered rocket. And in an Evel Knievel type of daredevil stunt, he, the builder of the rocket, Mike, launched himself 1,800 feet into the air. And this was part of a documentary, which is on Amazon. But then subsequently, he did a launch for the Science Channel's program, Homemade Astronauts. And it was during that launch where the parachutes failed to deploy. And so it was his final daredevil stunt, magnificent 5,000 feet up. It goes with the territory. You know, people die climbing Mount Everest. People do all kinds of extreme things. So, you know, it was a daredevil death. But my point of it is, I was thinking about that anniversary and I was out just with normies. And I guess I was, you know, I brought it up and it got conversations going in certain directions, which is, you know, kind of what his mission did anyway. You know, the idea was to we put the research flat earth on the side of the rocket. And then, of course, that becomes the subject, not the launch, but this meme that the media went overboard to try to stamp out. A threatening idea, as ludicrous as it is. So anyway, this whole thing has been a tremendous thought experiment, if you think about it. But what I found was, contrary to how I find people to be in the trutherville side of things, when I talk about news being manufactured, history being proactively faked, I kind of thought that people who aren't even into conspiracy theories would find nothing in it or would completely reject it without really listening. But no, I found quite the opposite. There was a receptive audience to the idea that history is proactively manufactured, possibly scripted decades in advance. And the reasons why are what we got into. What's up, Reality Witness? Appreciate the super chat. So we're talking about, you know, why and what is my basis for saying so. So I brought up Edward Bernays, and that kind of started the conversation about the idea of the public being, you know, managed as a collective, as a hive, and how manageable it is, how programmable people are, how people are prone, you know, in large numbers to accept ridiculous things and then reaffirm it within that echo chamber. And it's not hard to believe, you know, if you point out that, well, all the conspiracy theorists believe a bunch of crazy stuff from the point of view of the non-conspiracy theorists. So you can already see from the normie point of view, you can understand how large groups can be put into these alternative universes just by propagandizing them a certain way. So why should you be so sure as a normie that you aren't in a similar, analogous type of mental structure? And this conversation, again, led to a few other things, but mainly the idea that there's a need to govern so many people by a small group. How can you do it? But by limiting their options, limiting their worldview, etc. So it's all about this idea, of course, of, like, we often talk about superstition, maintaining the cohesion of the Roman state. This idea that the masses are fickle and lawless and need some kind of like fear of God to keep them in line. So anyway, I don't think this is so much of a far out concept, especially not compared to what you see flying around the conspiracy truther circles today. Like today, the main conversation I keep seeing on Twitter is Jim Carrey's been replaced by Mickey Rooney or something. Like, people can't understand. It's just Botox. But is this intentional? Are they intentionally making this into a conspiracy theory? Probably. I happen to think conspiracy theories are mainly manufactured myths by the government. It's not just people profiteering off of these crazy stories, but it's actually part of a alternative worldview. You got the main and the alt, both part of the establishment. But it's very clear to me that there's no valid conspiracy theories out there. It's just a bunch of entertaining conjecture. So I get back and I start looking back into Edward Bernays, who's considered to be the father of modern PR. JG, I can't actually take calls tonight, unfortunately, but I do have a plan. I'm going to buy a secondary phone, and I'll be using that to take calls when we're on these live streams. Joined by King Ravana, Frank Murr 33, Polly Coffin. Well, anyway, this conversation goes into these areas that I think were easy to discuss, and it didn't throw people off, like when you bring up the usual conspiracy ideas, like the Epstein nonsense, which is something else I described as largely manufactured mythology. I mean, unless anybody has evidence that is contrary to that. But last time we were talking, I went into this area where some of the main QAnon quote evidence is actually part of some alternate reality game by some company called WorldCore. Let's see here. Synchromorphy says Jim Carrey played Andy Kaufman, who was a notorious hoaxer playing Tony Clifton in makeup. It's all a psyop. It could be, or it could just be age and bad plastic surgery. I mean, that makes more sense to me, because if you wanted to fake a Jim Carrey, you would just get a hyper realistic Jim Carrey mask and it would look like Jim Carrey. This looks like Jim Carrey with plastic surgery. So I think it could be that people are reading too much into it. Oh yeah, thank you for the contribution for the phone fund. And I'm opting into the secondary phone instead of some software because I can take it anywhere. I still may do the 800 number when I'm at the desktop. So anyway, I go back into my research materials because I was looking at Edward Bernays' book, Propaganda, which is public domain. And I thought, we could republish this, build the IPS library. And I was going through it and I realized that there's a little bit of contention over this guy, Edward Bernays. Again, one of the co-founders of Netflix. I think the first CEO was actually a relative of Edward Bernays. And I think the contention here is that he cited the work of Walter Lippmann. And some would suggest that he stole the work of Walter Lippmann, who was a journalist. The difference is Edward Bernays comes off as very much like in favor of this idea of PR stunts and manipulating the mass mind, like that the masses need to be governed by a enlightened, smaller elite. So Edward Bernays was something of an apologist for mass media mind control. And Walter Lippmann, by contrast, was a journalist who was actually warning against how this destroys any possibility of true democracy, and that we are basically allowing the masses to be engineered or puppeteered by a small subset of the population who have access to this ability to control media. And again, Walter Lippmann's book, I think it's called The Phantom Public. He made a lot of interesting observations, and I'm going to be using this in some of my future whiteboard discussions. There's some concepts he brought up, and we often talk about this idea of the mind war, how engineered it is, how it is the war is peace, Orwellian government model, where everything's going on in the mind to keep everybody from going to each other's throats, literally. Well, he describes this mass media mind control as a sublimated civil war, and alludes to the, and again, this is from 100 years ago, Walter Lippmann's books, but he alludes to the idea that the government, by necessity, engineers fake crises in order to gauge public reaction, and that these were used as essentially a way of allowing majority rule without having to use physical brutality, but rather to just have it all go on in the mind and manufacture consent. So this is the idea here, is that mass opinions are being manufactured because it's seen as the most effective and bloodless and least destructive way to rule. Well, this is exactly what Michael Aquinas wrote in his book Mind Wars. Well, it was called Mind Wars from, I'll have to get the whole PDF again, from PSYOP to Mind War, but this was like a document circulated in the Pentagon, and it was commissioned, or rather ordered for him to write it, by that General Vallely, who is one of the chairpersons on TPUSA. The connections between Satanism, mind control, and Hollywood are worth exploring here when you get into Michael Aquino and his connections to the Church of Satan, he being the head of the Temple of Set, which was a theistic offshoot of the original church. Thank you very much, Frank Burr, 33. Appreciate it. Definitely appreciate the support. I'm definitely thinking here that these connections are worth looking at, because what we're seeing is a common thread. The idea is that the way to rule over people is in mass is to essentially use theater and make it all symbolic, reduce the amount of actual destruction. And this is why we always talk about the bloody guardrail. One of the things that keeps a lot of the truthers stuck in their paradigm is they seem to assume that people die in psychological operations, that these are actual murders. And there are people who are, I think they're just stuck in their ways. It's been decades to like 20 years since people have been saying this crap. But essentially, that is kind of the final barrier to people seeing how fake things are. And they de-emphasize the fake. Instead, they'll say, oh, that's a satanic ritual, or this was a black ops, or if the elite are so bad, why wouldn't they kill us? Like, they always have some kind of argument for maintaining the idea that people die, or some people died, or at least the jumpers died. Nope. You don't kill people in movies. And we've gone through a list of reasons why it's not plausible or even necessary, and highly unlikely when you consider how far in advance these various events have been planned. Take, for example, Charlie Kirk. By all indications, that fake event was scripted, written down, at least in the mid-90s, and was already scheduled to occur. And we have our reasons for saying so when we, dive into these things. But my point of it is, the further back it's planned, the less likely, the less sense it makes that you should consider that people are actually dying, even accidentally, as some would assert. Well, some people had to have died. No. There were some 88 drills going on, anti-terror drills going on 9/11/01. You use these mass casualty drills to essentially create closed movie sets out in public for this theater, street theater. King Ravana, Black Magic Nobles. Where's the Charlie youth? I don't know who that refers to. Oh, you're talking about his kids. Oh, that's right. The rented kids. No, the whole family was fake, phony. And what's really strange, we noticed this before, but if you look, there are so many consistencies that it seems to create this perception that Erica Kirk was always an actress, or at least playing a role, and that she infiltrated Charlie's life in order to take over TPUSA and get him killed. Anyway, people are arriving at this conclusion, which looks like they're finding some inconvenient facts, but it looks more likely to me that this is the planned narrative. Instead of recognizing that Charlie's not dead and they're both fake, they engineered a narrative in which Erica Kirk was fake, playing a stage role, playing a character, essentially. And it's kind of clever. And this is how it always works, though, where, they give this alternative version to the mainstream that still assumes the death happened. So again, if you subtract the notion that Charlie's actually dead, and then you look at the way she's being portrayed as she's being unveiled as this Jezebel betrayer, not to mention probably not even into males, it's like, well, okay, they've created this perception here for the truthers who think Charlie's dead. And it all points to she's the bad guy, she's the villain. So this is how they use, just stories, what I call guardrails. These are the alternative stories that keep people from calling out the entire thing as fake. It preserves the essential reality that an assassination happened. And then it gets deeper. You find Charlie's friends with the guy that she was dating. I mean, it gets to be a really small and incestuous group. But anyway, it's all, as we know, it's all fake history. Why do they want people to die so much? Says, yeah, well, that's the thing. I call it the death clingers. It's like, this is good news. It's good news that we're looking at mind war and simulated events instead of people being, wiped out and all these horrible things being real, because there's enough, real bad things in the world that why be stressed out against the additional stuff? But they cling to it. These bitter, these corpse clutchers, they cling to it for some reason. It's very shilly, honestly. I can understand it a few years ago, but in 2026, if you still think people die in psyops, we're looking at you as likely a propagandist, because that final guardrail is what maintains the sheep pen more than any other one. Thank you again, Reality Witness. Microphone, good idea. I'm definitely committed to this project and getting the office and everything situated. So much so that I am making a 4th attempt at getting hired by the Walmart. Just talked to the manager, and I'll be in touch with them Monday. I mean, the last 3 interviews went great, but I think it was a civil judgment against me for defamation that had me stricken from the list. But I think that I could probably talk my way out of it, to be honest. I'll have to explain that I had a valid defamation suit, and I didn't go because I felt bad for the guy. And then he retaliates with a really terrible attempt to accuse me of defamation because I was just exercising free speech. But anyway, I won in the end. His website disappeared. He spent $30,000 in attorneys. But when this is over, I'm just going to sue him for malicious prosecution. So I'm not going to pay the $642,000. That's ridiculous. However, that looks bad to a potential employer, apparently. I mean, it's not like I'm a felon. It's not like I committed a crime. I exercise my free speech, but it looks bad. I get it. King Ravana says, has anyone seen videos of Charlie Kirk with his 3 children? You know what's weird about all those videos is you only see the back of the child's head. And then they show you, they say, well, it's to protect the privacy. Okay, sure. But then why do they show a video of the child in the crib waking up and singing some prayer. I mean, some song to Jesus. I mean, they have these weird clips. Like in one of the clips, Eric is driving, and the kid looks out the window at a billboard of her dad, and she says, "It's Charlie Kirk, not it's Daddy, it's Charlie Kirk." How many of you, as toddlers, referred to your father by his first and last name? It must be a slow news week because Candace Owens is digging into Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons again. She still can't get it right. It's just clickbait at this time. But what they're doing now is they're also hyping up aliens or demons. It's getting more intense now. Well, that's the big debate. Are they interdimensional aliens or demons? Is there a difference? You have the alien people calling out the religious people for being superstitious. And it's like, ufology is a superstition. It's not an ology. It's not a rigorous attempt at research. It's a bunch of grifters. Plain Dakota says they don't kill, but it doesn't mean they won't kill. Well, anytime somebody asserts that somebody must have died at this or that event, I'd say, well, which one? Show me. Show me the staged PSYOP event where somebody really died. And I never get an answer. Then you get the anti-vax fanatics. And they're going to say, are you going to say there weren't 20 million corpses from Bill Gates? Like, no, I don't believe in that. That's just, again, in any anti-position. And when I say anti, I mean anti-establishment, but it's kind of like the other side of the coin. Any anti-position really ought to be abandoned right now because it requires you to be plugged into their paradigm and their political horseshoe. And unless you want to be a participant in what is essentially a rigged alternate reality game, and it's part of a soul-sucking, energy harvesting mechanism. I mean, I prefer analyzing it from the outside, which is what we're doing and what we advocate in activism. Join my Critter-fest. Thanks for joining. What's up? Plain Decoded. Expressionless Face. 139 CAD. Oh, you're talking about Jim Carrey. Well, or me? Who's got the expressionless face? Jim Carrey looks like he has gotten some injections in his lips. I don't see anything there that would indicate mask because, again, the masks are hyper realistic. And by the way, a lot of the people saying this crap also say everything on TV is CGI and AI. Well, then it would look better. So no, the fact that it doesn't look convincing makes me think it's just, I'm not even saying botched. It's just, you know, it's injections to make him look embalmed. I mean, young. Jessica Roberts, do you have a Waffle House? I think we do, actually. I don't know if it, no, actually, for some reason, it has closed down. I've been there a few times. I mean, it's not as rowdy as the ones I've seen on Twitter. It has an undeserved reputation because people will find clips. The only reason why you see people fighting at Waffle House is because it's the only place open for all the drunks. We have another place like that where every Friday night, Saturday night, there'd be fights. And it's just because it was the only place they could go. All right, let's see. So anyway, we were talking about the constructed narrative of Erica Kirk. And so if you're following that narrative that she's this villainous character they're creating, but you're not including in your thinking that Charlie Kirk is also fake, then you're kind of missing it. Because this is a spin they gave you. We don't know the real backstory of Erica Kirk. This is the made-for-TV one. You know, she was a TV or reality TV actress before this stuff. So, in other words, they've given you a fake backstory of her to make her appear to be a villain. Instead of us actually talking about that the fact that she and Charlie Kirk have mysterious backgrounds because we don't know who the hell they are, and that they're both plants. So this is how they manage the alternative perspectives and the conspiracy theory perspective. And it leads to the inevitable conclusion that Charlie was killed by the Mossad in order to prevent him from cutting their donations and all these stupid stories they put out there, but it's all leading to the same spot. It's an alternate reality game. Diana says, never eat carbs, especially waffles, dangerous food. I was actually more or less fasting for like 3.5 days. I mean, drinking water, of course. Synchro says, I finally ate Waffle House waffles last year. They were disappointing and soft. Might as well have been pancakes. Busy says Waffle House is trash, can be entertaining. I think their coffee's decent. And they have like I said, it's their reputations. All right, so we were talking about this engineered narrative, this idea of guardrails where they plant stories. They create these stories in advance. So this would mean that all the tweets or texts rather between Charlie and Candace Owens were scripted. That this is this is part of their role, and it makes sense. And it's kind of interesting how the two people closest to him, as far as the Erica and Candace Owens, are both now such popular figures now that this event has happened. Like they both who benefited from Charlie Kirk's neck squibbing more than Candace or Erica. And this Candace Erica thing is a soap opera, and it's engaging the same demographics that are into soap operas. What's happened? It says Erica is still super creepy, even though I know she's acting. Well, I think it's all part of her role. I mean, she is. I mean, the thing she does with her eyes, it's intentional, by the way. When you see, these people know PR. They know how the public perceives things. So when you see her in tight leather pants, holding JD Vance, and then scrubbing the back of his head, that's meant to convey the image it conveyed. It's meant to contradict the trad wife thing. She looks like she's celebrating. And then her TPUSA meeting afterward, where she was talking about how much money they were making from merch. Again, this is manufactured. And the reason I can say so with such conviction is that this is the exact character arc of her counterpart character in The Tempest. And I don't think anyone here needs a reminder about The Tempest. But if you do, go to my blog, timosman.substack, and look up The Tempest, and you'll see how a movie synchronized with a real event actually follows not just the death of the Charlie Kirk character, but the widow taking over his organization, being accused of faking her grief on TV to win them over, and then later being accused, or a lot of people think that she actually was behind the death of her husband. So there's that. We would call that concurrent programming. Kevin Moore says, it's funny that Jim Carrey starred in a movie called Mask, and these days people think someone's wearing his face. Yeah, you know what? That is interesting, because he was also the one considered to be most likely playing the role of Joe Biden. Other people are saying clones, by the way. By the way, is the audio okay? Somebody had said commented on the microphone. I'm not sure how it is. Anonymous said, I saw a very funny fake AI Waffle House brawl movie. Yeah, and out of all the people who watch it, how many know it's fake? Like, that has actually happened. We talked about this last year when Mountainhead came out with the character Venice based on Elon Musk, where the generative AI on his social media platform is so realistic, it's causing chaos throughout society as people manufacture, hate crimes and terror attacks. And He doesn't care. The world's burning. Now, after that movie was released, again, Mountainhead, the LA riots happened again. The ones that happened regarding the anti-ICE activists burning stuff, jumping on cars, the usual. And this is right before the No Kings protests, but the timing of it was synchronized with those riots. But we're at that point now. We've already seen it. A large number of the ICE raid videos that went viral on Facebook turned out to be fake. There was a fake Ghislaine Maxwell sighting with her brother, AI, and the person on that particular one posts them on Instagram, gets many hits, but people know they're fake because his channel's making AI, fake sightings of people. Well, that one went viral on Twitter, so people think that Ghislaine Maxwell's in Canada somewhere and that she's been cloned or replaced. So I think this looks like an active measure where people can't tell real from fake. There's obviously confusion here. And the confused ones, or the ones who are calling out the discrepancies, look insane to the ones who are, more mainstream. But neither of them really know what's true. It's like this is just another layer of confusion. So you got mainstream confusion and alternative confusion, which is just a little bit deeper. But when people can't be certain about what is real or fake, when they're this confused, it just seems to me we're in a state of philosophical crisis, and they're just getting started. And then to add to the confusion, you have many news media fake. I was gonna say fakeologists, but essentially, yeah, news media fakeologists, media critics or media fakery analysts, auto hoaxers, those who are looking at the news and examining it for, just basic fact checking. We're now being thrown in with these people who are saying, well, everything's AI, and it's been AI for many years. So some people are going too far, and I don't know if it's intentional, like disinfo and noise, but it doesn't add any sort of clarity. Like for someone to say Jeffrey Epstein never existed, Erica Kirk's CGI, like that doesn't help. These are unsupportable observations, and there are plenty of contradictions. And no one has yet convincingly proved that Ghislaine Maxwell has always just been pixels, that she's never existed. Like that's ludicrous, unless you're going to back it up. So if you're not backing up wild claims, what are you doing? We don't get hard evidence. What are we supposed to do? Trust them or join them in their confusion? And it's not acceptable when you have better explanations, more plausible explanations. Like what we've established with Kirk and Erica and many others is that you have people who are plants playing roles on the world stage like actors. This is the theater of Psywar. It has its actors. And we do all kinds of character breakdowns of the various actors that we talk about in this context. So we don't need to introduce that they don't exist. It's enough to say this person's an actor. And I also would say that the whole clone idea, people say, oh, it's Jim Carrey's clone. I think that's always been misinformation to cover up the hyper-realistic masks. Busy56 says, plot summary of Jim Carrey's next movie, Evergreen Pines. In the fading summer, a middle-aged man finds himself at a strange sleepaway camp competing against eccentric campers. He searches for his missing friend and a mythic gray beast guarding a hidden treasure. Sounds like Bohemian Grove. Well, we've discussed Jim Carrey as having the archetype of the fool and his significance in the Truman Show and the various movies he's done that has this. Many of them have this connection to Sirius, the dog star, for some reason. And then he's also been pretty much pushing the idea of the Illuminati. What did he call it? The all-seeing, the all-licking tongue or whatever. And he goes on the Jimmy Kimmel show with the triangle, the Jay-Z triangle over his face, and wags his tongue, like, and he's made these statements about the number 33 and Christ consciousness. He even wrote a children's book about reincarnation, how Roland rolls. I think how Roland rolls or something like that. So he's always kind of conveyed this idea of being something of an insider, dropping hints or something. And so right now, this is kind of like, is this part of his character being connected to these the same people who are calling everything fake and masky, who've invoked him as the Joe Biden? Like Jim Carrey could have played Biden. I mean, if you look, doesn't mean he did. I mean, a lot of things are fakeable. Well, I think everything might be now. What's happened is it's all totally coordinated. The narratives from all these influencers are intentionally intertwined and play into the larger script. Yeah, exactly. And this makes all the more sense when you consider that the event was planned decades in advance. I mean, this is a JFK scale event in terms of its significance, I think. And this entire drama has kept so many people enraptured for 5 months now. And look at the people who've been platformed by this. And it's clear to me it's not, or this is not organic. This isn't like a reality unfolding just naturally. No, the public aren't good investigators as a hive mind. They're not uncovering anything. They're walking down a rabbit trail that was already there. And they're being led by Candace Owens. It's been this way since September 10th or 11th. When was it? When did Charlie's ghost come down and whisper into her ear that somebody betrayed him at TPUSA? It's like he comes down and gives her a mystery. He didn't just give her the names. But this has always been a foregone conclusion. We called this out in advance. Zed is dead, says Diana Southard. Yeah, I saw that. Okay, audio is good. Excellent. Lord Laney says, is clone just another word for legend, or essentially crisis actor character? Yeah, I would say that when the whole clone idea covers up the real technology of hyper-realistic masks, which were classified until like 2015. But the term legend does mean, in terms of like in Russian intelligence, they use this term legend to describe somebody with a backstory. So they don't really exist. And that's what I point out with, Charlie Kirk didn't exist in the sense that he's a plant, like a spy. They're infiltrating society somewhere. They get a fake backstory and basically dig in, blend in, merge. And so that's what we're looking at here. So if you look at the idea of fake people playing roles on the world stage, you don't have to include nonsense like they never existed. That's unnecessary mystification of a subject that we can analyze a little more objectively. And the same people who push that also push simulation theory, which is, it's not a theory, but I think that these are all attacks on cognition. I think these are agents of confusion, wittingly or not. Jessica Roberts says, I got a sales person position at the White House. The money isn't bad. It's easy and anonymous. I use my initials on the sales floor. Oh, Waffle House. Sorry. I read that as White House because I've been thinking about this White House employee that was cyber stalking for years. I've been working on trying to get this case moving. I don't think the FBI does anything other than put things in filing cabinets, but prove me wrong. No, my ambition right now is Walmart and increasing my royalty income stream. You see, this is something I've done before. When I transitioned from working full time to writing full time, right before I started this channel, I was working at the Walmart because it was not that it's easy, but that it's not mentally taxing. I'm not like, it doesn't exhaust me, so I can still work in my breaks, work before work after work. But it was during that job where I was able to, stably just produce a certain output of books, and I was able to stop working. William says, Garrow Jurassic Liars is looking for your call-in number. We still don't have a call-in number. I mean, I do, but I can't take calls yet. But what we will do, as I said, is I will get a second phone, and I will be able to start taking calls. There's a pretty good way I think I can make this work, where the sound and audio will be as good as if I were using some software on the desktop. I've done some tests. What's up, Dorian? 1-800-KING-TIM. Well, I can certainly get an 800 number. The one reason I would, the one I've looked at, is that it has callers on queue. So we get back to back. So if one person starts rambling about religion or politics or some mainstream event that anyone wants to hear about it, we just transition to the next caller. So Busy56 says Jim Carrey also paints and did some weird paintings of Trump. Recently he was on a clip talking about how everyone wants to see or hold Trump's head. So anyway, he seemed to have some TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. Mask Off is in here checking in. All right, so Jim Carrey. Anyway, we're talking about his archetype, the fool. This and another element too is how these actors are always acting. I think, like Robert De Niro, Trump deranged, was advocating for the removal of Trump. Definitely was heavily Trump deranged, but he also plays the Trump-esque character, Senator McLaughlin, who gets shot while he's at the podium ranting about illegal immigrants. So we've talked about the relationship between the world stage characters, actors, politicians, and their movie counterparts, and how sometimes the actors will use that role in some propaganda capacity on the world stage, like reiterating it. We kind of saw the same thing with Mark Ruffalo, who plays the character Mickey 17, a Trump-esque character who survives an assassination. And then you see him being outspoken against Trump. It's a reoccurring pattern. What's up, Ears Up, Lean Dion? Yeah, another JC. True. And the Truman Show has a lot of interesting elements about it, which are useful for describing because we live in a Truman Show, but not a literal one, as in like simulation or everything is a stage, but like we live in a internalized Truman Show. So it's a mix. We still have the real world, but then there's the version of it that we're consistently updated on. And that includes all of the fake history with the presupposition it's real, and all of the augmentations, hyperstitions. We live in hyper reality, and it happens by fusing real and fake. The fake is planned way into the future. So you have the timeline you're on, we're all traveling past, present, future. And then this script, which influences future events, these scripts, which are coming out in sequence, one after another on a program, it fuses with our internalized experience of the world. And then in the past, these two things are merged because history is lies agreed upon. And this formula has worked for I don't know how long. I mean, at least as far as the research I'm engaged in right now, I'm chronicling 1963 to 2026, and then we can kind of go from there. But we can already make the case that recent history is a fabrication. But in the ways that shape our collective perception about the world, at large, it's kind of like, I'm not saying your life or anything's a simulation, but there's this simulated version that overlaps it. But you can't really separate from it if you aren't looking outside of the framework they give you. So if your view of the news and history is not inclusive of fakery, you won't see the difference. And it should make a difference. This is why it matters when we talk about fake events. We're not just talking about a PR stunt. We're talking about simulated historic events. We just, again, lived through a historic assassination. That's going to be in the history books. And the organization TPUSA, of course, is going to be and growing as a result of this. And this is all fake grassroots. When they say they open all these chapters, I don't know if I believe it. But anyway, it's all about creating this sublimated civil war. And that's why I say if you take the anti-position on anything, you are participating in the mind war. You're essentially a foot soldier or fodder for the PSYOP entertainment complex. And this includes anybody in the alternative media sphere. If that's where you're at, you're actually part of the mind war. You know, it's a low level of engagement that requires you to be completely ignorant about these things. Let's see here. Big hair tsunami. Thank you for that. 20 wrenches. Like, for example, Minneapolis. We've been analyzing those two events, and they're obviously fake. Well, look what they did. Look what any of these events do. Even Kirk's, these martyrs they create, Renee Good, Charlie Kirk. It definitely does incite this left-right antagonism. Conspiracy Thug, Chase, Dominic, Chibruta, One Day Very Soon, Flat Bob, Clockwork 113, KBeb 888, Mike Crazy, Iris Pia, Roxy, Tommy Retail Army, Sabasa and Ginger, Essence Uncaged, Lord Carve, Stephen Grangerich have all received the Blue Shield. FMGR, Nero Jack, Just Give Me 5 Minutes Please, Reality Hijack. Thank you all. Now we do still have a schedule of things to look forward to. By the way, I'm working on part 1 of this project, 1963 to 2026, and I'm calling it A History of Newsbending, because what we're talking about is, you know, that 1968 play Newsbending shows this newsroom where a journalist finds out that they write the news 5 years in advance for all the reasons I stated here. Stability, maintaining peace, at least on the outside, at the expense of our inner peace. And newsbending is essentially the idea that news is written in advance for these purposes. But for people who have any kind of trouble with this proposition, all you have to think about is, and this is, I guess, even those who believe that these are false flags and people die, is it not true that these simulated events are planned in advance? At least, I mean, you would have to. They can't be spontaneous. So you have to give us some thought. Well, how long would it take to plan this, coordinate it? And these events aren't just some local group. It also includes, you know, law enforcement, fire departments, EMTs. These are bigger operations. You know, you only see the tip of the iceberg. We don't know what's going on backstage. And so when you consider how far back they're planned, then you're already including the idea that we are looking at events scheduled in the future that are performed in the present and become part of our history. So there's already fake history happening, however you want to look at it. What we're finding in our research by connecting the dots, by mind mapping out the connections, and by ignoring those who just think we're apopheniacs, who think it's all just coincidence, again, we'll deal with those arguments later. I mean, we pretty much already have. But what this is revealing is that it's actually the case that these events are planned more than, in most cases, 10 or more years. And if that sounds outlandish or hard to believe, yeah, of course it is. I mean, it sounds impossible if you take for granted that what you're seeing on TV is how things actually are occurring organically. You're not recognizing the amount of creative control that the worldview monopoly has. Thank you, Reality Witness. It says 100 underlined twice. Copacetic brought in 10 more wrenches. Thank you. X50 Nathan, Gem 7 Angel, Obadiah, Marie Laveau, Tastes Like Yum, Electra 2025, Gigi Han, Kenley, All the World's a Stage have all received blue shields. Now, what does it matter? And this was the other part of it. What does it matter that your history is manufactured? It depends on how you look at it. I mean, this is a good time to wonder if you really want to be plugged into voting. I mean, you can join in the fray, and it's a entertaining thing to get involved, I suppose, if you need something in your life. But what's the point? I'm not trying to dissuade people, but I'm just saying, what is the point? Because if events are as I describe, then it really brings into question the significance or importance or efficacy of voting. It would seem that voting is part of the political theater as a steam valve, basically, as a way to give the masses the illusion of control so they don't really figure out that they're already under control by something that supersedes all these things. So we're looking at an uncomfortable, I guess, I mean, it is sort of an uncomfortable truth, but I think it's like a benevolent dictatorship or some kind of soft tyranny. But it's certainly the case that mind control is the rule, not the exception. That psyops are not anomalies, but they're just part of the standard operating procedure, systemic fakery. So then it's like, well, what do you do about it if this is true? And I'm making the case. I mean, I'm going to make the best case I can because I think it's not hard to see it once you see it. But it's very easy to get distracted by all these conspiracy theories and these rabbit trails, like the satanic stuff, demons, simulation theory, all that malware for the mind is what it is. It's all distraction from the essential fact of how we have been always, I guess, but how we are being governed. And then, of course, the question is like, are you against it? Or are you in agreement with the need to maintain some stable global worldview to prevent conflict? And that's kind of the idea behind Michael Aquino's book, that you could just have the same results, but instead of actually letting them fight it out, you find out which group is more intense about an issue and you give them the victory. So it's still kind of like might makes right from that perspective. And I say benevolent because what else do you call it? I mean, it's still, I mean, it depends on how you look at it, I suppose. What is your opinion on mankind? Do you think that this system is necessary to maintain order? Gemarian says there is no external savior. Learn how to save yourself. Well, from what? I mean, aside from the normal things you run into in your life, I'm just suggesting that what they introduce are a lot of things that don't exist, scenarios that won't happen. Like I took a break from media. I was kind of I was purposely keeping myself out of the loop, like no Twitter, Didn't go to Discord. In fact, I haven't been in Discord in days. So I was just disconnecting from it. So I didn't know what was going on. And the people who are plugged in, even just a little, who are just like a few hours a day, who are just catching the headlines, they're mind virus spreaders. The first thing they do is, oh, this one doesn't have that mind virus. Did you hear? No, I did not. Boom. Here, have this. So these ideas get disseminated. The stories spread around. It's almost like this is some sort of a, I guess you would call it a um, mind virus, but it's like, yeah, it's certainly contagious. Like, I don't know what is it, a compulsion? They're tapping into the natural instinct to, like, gossip. I guess gossip's part of what we do. It's kind of built into us to just spread whatever latest intel you have, but they've managed to make this whole world into a big gossip circle. And people don't hold back. Curtis says, off topic, but not going to read that. I believe in free speech, but I'm not going to read certain things. And you shouldn't be protected from the consequences of your use of free speech. You know, I think a lot of people say things and they act like they're victims for being blocked or reviled. It's like, well, this is the real world. You kind of have to consider that. I saw an America First flag on a car today. I thought, that's interesting. Nick Fuentes has reached out here. People believe that stuff. Well, see, Critter Fest Sanctuary. I thought you were some kind of like animal hospital or something. And then I see you make a comment about somebody violating a deer. I mean, come on. Get out of here. That's not what an animal lover would say. All right. Anyway, moving on. So Jim Carrey's not Jim Carrey. That's going viral. Makes people look crazy. I did go through Candace Owens' latest live streams about Aleister Crowley a little bit. And they're kind of mixing things up. People are very imprecise. Like I see conversations now on Twitter. You know, what is a demon? Do we have a consensus agreement? Why is it suddenly the word of the day? It's going to be the word of the year. Everyone's talking about demons. Aliens are demons. We got some former NASA astronauts saying these things are demonic. Like, I don't know. Do demons even exist yet? Lean Dion says we got a MAGA shooter motivated by the Epstein files, reportedly killed by SS at Mar-a-Lago. Yes. And they even said that was it Marjorie Taylor Greene? No, I mean, what was the name of the shooter at the ice rink? That shooter had been looking into some Epstein stuff. And we kind of said this would happen. We already said this would happen, that they're probably creating the plausible narrative that somebody did something crazy because they want something to get done over this. I still can't get over the fact that this whole Epstein thing was already performed. This whole play was performed for the QAnon crowd like 10 years ago. And now they're bringing it back. And I don't know if you saw the switch, but they went from, oh, he was working for the Mossad to he was working for the KGB. They repackaged it so it would be, I think, palatable to someone on the left. And did you see the movie Black Phone about the grabber? The grabber, who's this devil-looking character, looks exactly like Epstein. It's got to be intentional. I don't know if it's a sick joke. It could be. Like this could be intentional, considering that Epstein's face had been in the media long before the movie came out. Copacetic says ice rink shooter, another ice thing. Yeah, it seems like it. More concerted messaging. That's one thing about the world stage theater is they managed to connect a lot of things with symbolism. Symbolism is big, color symbolism, numbers, archetypes. We'd recently done a lot of work on the green and how the Wicked Witch represents the left, and Antifa, Trump is the Wizard of Oz. But the movie breakdowns, I'm talking about the movies that are like trending at that time that we do, are really just to show how there is an entrainment between entertainment and fake events, which, further emphasizes the notion that these are fake. You can't have a fake event occurring at the same time a movie comes out the exact same plot. I mean, you can, but it gets a little suspicious when it becomes like a regularly occurring feature. But when you consider the implications, well, then you have to consider how far back the plot line, the script, the details were already written down. And it's through our predictive programming analysis that we arrive at approximate dates, at a guess as to when this or that staged event was actually planned to be put into our timeline. Is the ICE thing, no, actually the ICE thing is still kind of going on, but it's not as, they haven't done any more atrocities recently, but I saw that Don Lemon is being indicted, which may have some significance. Again, there's that whole series called The Madness with an Elon Musk-like character, a tech billionaire who finances online Nazis and helps steal the election. He gets assassinated. But in that one, the protagonist is a CNN anchor who gets fired, and he's blamed for a crime, blamed for killing a right-wing hate monger, and he ends up going into hiding, and the hood protects him. But at one point, he's called Don Lemonade, but it's about this guy who's basically based on Don Lemon. So I thought it was interesting to see Don Lemon being involved here with the anti-ICE movement, and now he's gotten himself into legal trouble, and the crowd is on his side. And again, The Madness is another one of these movies that has a Musk-esque character spreading mass mind viruses, causing havoc. So Mountainhead, The Madness, reoccurring themes, and reoccurring common denominators with all these Musk-esque characters in movies that actually relate to his real-world character in a very precise way, which isn't just writers imitating him. It's not just life, imitating, art imitating life. It's rather, it looks like that, and you can hand wave it away as simply that, but the timing of it kind of betrays that notion. So when I say that these events are imitating movies or parallel with movies, then it'd be more accurate to say psyops imitate entertainment. It's not life is imitating the entertainment. And by psyops, I'm implying fake events. Yeah, the new thing is the Clintons are being questioned. I see these things. Clinton, Trump. Clinton's like, oh, he wasn't there. Trump, I've been exonerated. So did he or didn't he? It doesn't matter. The people who believe he did will still believe it. The people who still worship at the altar of MAGA will say he didn't do it. And then the other side gets accuse him or accuses them of defending pedovores. This is a complete reversal. Now it's the left calling the right the protector of pedovores. They're calling the right the ones compromised by Epstein. I have Epstein fatigue. Epsteinology is tired and worn out, and nothing's come of it but just more confusion. And much of it is just very questionable anyway. And it seems to me that there's the strategy that over the years, they had many of these operatives sending in fake FBI tips where, like, yeah, I went to Epstein Island and they were Satanists in hooded robes and goats, and they ate the adrenochrome from screaming babies. Like, they can post anything in these tips. And all this, and then the FBI says, nothing was found here. So then the conspiracy theorists get these leaked documents and they think, look, the FBI is covering it up. No, there is probably nothing in it. But the fact that the QAnon crowd, the Save the Children crowd, never found anything, never saved any children, they never had any sort of resolution, just makes me recognize how short the collective attention span is. Because now we have the same rabbit trails being tread by the other side. Meanwhile, all the people who were part of it the first time are saying, oh, you guys are finally catching up. Like right now, you've got Candace Owens there talking about Crowley and satanic sacrifices or whatever. And he wasn't even a Satanist. I mean, that's what I'm saying. They're so imprecise about the stuff. In fact, she's a Catholic. She converted to Catholic. And what he practiced had a version of the Catholic Mass. Like, it's not that far off. It's more of a Gnostic Christianity, if anything, with updated gods and goddesses. But structurally, these things are analogous. So when she, calls this stuff out as satanic or something, it's clear she doesn't really do any research. She's throwing out buzzwords. I had a conversation about this the other day, how Lucifer is not in the Bible and Satan's not an entity. That's mostly just mythology that's coming out of literature. John Milton, Paradise Lost, Dante's Inferno, where there are these public misconceptions that have just been grafted onto the actual religious beliefs. So then these stories get passed around. Hollywood makes movies on it, and people think that these things are how it really is. It's like, no, you can't really even substantiate these ideas as, like, how are you going to say that these things are real if the body of mythology or theology that would, you see what I'm saying? Like, outside of the Bible, what's your evidence for a Lucifer or a Satan without that frame of reference? And then if that's your frame of reference, what does it mean that they don't even exist in there in the way that you've assumed because of what you've heard, not what you've read? So all those who say the Luciferians this and the Luciferian blood drinkers, I'm sorry, but your Lucifer doesn't derive from the Bible. That's a misinterpretation of something about a king. So the Lucifer you must draw from them is the one from mythology. And same thing with these the ones who call out everything as being satanic. I don't know if you can find evidence of any real satanic cults sacrificing people. Like, has that ever really been a thing outside of satanic panics? The Church of Satan doesn't believe in human sacrifice. And they're also like animal rights people. Like, they would never hurt a goat. In fact, they worship animals in a weird way because they say that man is an animal and man is their god. It's their religion is not really a religion in any significant sense. So then, to bring up Crowley, again, the Crowley religion isn't even satanic. The reason why Michael Aquinos left the Church of Satan is because they were atheistic and he wanted to have a theistic version. So he had to reach into Egyptian mythology, and that's where they grabbed Set. Capture the Loop says, wait until Grandma Normie finds out about spirit cooking. Yeah, these things are being very much mainstreamed, and I'm looking at the reactions. Are people buying into this stuff? And a lot of people do. I mean, a lot of people are saying it matter-of-factly. Like in one class, I was sitting in, some student had said something to the effect of, well, given that the Epstein stuff, and then made some broader point, everybody clapped their hands. And I'm like, okay, so I guess everybody's just going to accept it, but nobody's going to do anything. So what does that do? It probably just deepens the sense of powerlessness. What's up, PsyOp Sidecar? Thank you very much for the support, everyone. Tominoy says, because they ate all the evidence. That's pretty good. They ate all the jerky. Like I saw something about how Leonardo DiCaprio had eaten like 500 babies. Like he was keeping count. Jamarin May says, what do you think about the orphan trains in relation to the Cabbage Patch Kid dolls psyop of the 1980s? What was that psyop? Has anybody done any deeper dives into the Labubu bunnies? I've noticed that there's a lot of superstitions about dolls going around. Like it's becoming very popular right now. I mean, it's becoming very fashionable to be talking about demons like they are assumed to exist. But this also comes off as extremely religious and superstitious, and it's probably intentional. I've said before that even though you have the traditional versus progressive tug of war, and you have this godless, mechanistic, scientific paradigm, and then you got this traditional religious paradigm. You have these two things at war. They're not getting rid of either one. So you still have one faction that believes in angels and demons, and another faction that still believes in aliens. And the ones who believe in aliens are going to think the ones who believe in angels and demons as essentially archaic from the Dark Ages, superstitious and uneducated. But the truth of it is, aliens are simply angels for atheists. So they're not any better off. These are modern superstitions to replace the old superstitions. If you look into the statement, the instrumentum regnum, this idea that the elite have to maintain the cohesion of the state by using the fear of God, that whole concept has built into their system of rulership that you introduce these concepts because the masses are unruly and they need to be guardrailed. And so I talk about God constructs. It doesn't have to be a literal storm god, but you can convince people that if they don't change their ways, the ocean level is going to rise and everything's going to flood. And you can coerce them to pay to offset the damage they're doing to the environment. Yet that kind of construct serves the same purpose. And it's something that the collective has to contend with. And so people have to regulate each other. You have the environmentalists to cajole the people who still support the very environmentally destructive system of capitalism, and it's never-ending fight. Capture the Loop says demon idols. Yep. But what I'm saying here is that the concept of demons is not being refuted. I mean, I remember as a kid, I knew someone whose father was a pastor, and it was some small, I think it was some kind of Protestant, because actually it was at his library where I found my first books exposing the Catholic Church as Mystery Babylon and a bunch of New World Order literature. It came from that particular person's library, but they believed in demons, and I thought it was kind of quirky. Like my friend was like, yeah, when I was a kid, they cast the demons out of me. And even the occultists that I read from, the various books on the subject, don't seem to think demons are literal, which is a side topic. But the theory basically is that, and this has to do with like magic in general, that the process of magical incantations, evocations, is really about tapping into the part of the mind that is incorporeal, not in the body, but actually existing in the realm of possibilities. And that these invocations, prayers, whatever it is, are just giving form so you can interact with it. Kind of like an AI agent. in order to interact with the information, you need this intermediary. But that these entities or whatever aren't objectively real, but they're allowing you to exercise your will in a more magnified way by essentially like a sigil. You're bypassing all the usual filters between you and this higher aspect of yourself, and you're affecting change. But that's what I'm saying. These demons in the context of magic are generally seen as self-created constructs, and that their essential reality is immaterial, doesn't matter so long as you get results. And this is not a new idea. Even in Crowley's writings, you can find reference to this idea that it doesn't matter whether or not these things are real, but don't assume any objective reality to them. And I think the reason why is that you could create a cult and worship something that doesn't exist. It's just a figment, a delusion of somebody's imagination. And when we say something's, just a figment of the imagination, etc., it kind of denigrates imagination. I think imagination, sort of like the concept of magic, have been relegated to some, almost just escapism, fantasy, childishness, but that it has no real world function. What do you need an imagination for? You're not a kid with crayons. And the concept of magic is either essentially stripped down to stage magic and illusion and, Chris Angel and nonsense, or some kind of new agey stuff that you can't really separate from cognitive bias. I mean, they've done tests on prayer and wishful thinking, and it pretty much doesn't really do anything if you measure it from that view, like in a laboratory. Because somebody will get a result, they'll take credit or give credit to God. They won't get a result, they will in some way they'll excuse it. Like, oh, the universe didn't want me to have that yet. Or they only give you what you need, not what you want. It's like, well, maybe your experiment just didn't work. But anyway, the magic as it's practiced is a little more involved, I think a little more in depth. And it's not really so easily characterized. It's sort of a alchemical thing, I think. But I think it's given all this terminology that makes it seem more esoteric and arcane, when I think it really could be more classified in psychology if understood properly. But it also does have some significant ramifications for our dominant worldview, if indeed there is any measurable or tangible effect that conscious sentient beings exert into the external universe, not just in the way of direct material effects. I'm talking about probability manipulation. Stuff we've went into. I think last week we were actually talking about the evil eye. Like if true, what then? What does it imply? Well, it has tremendous implications. And it all ties into this idea that one of the more suppressed ideas out there, I think, has been this concept of co-creation. Why is it that magic has always been so demonized? Well, I think there's a few reasons. In a way, it's not outsourcing to a higher power, which is sort of heretical. New Resident Evil Requiem video game released. Perhaps investigate the plot of the game. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, anything that comes out needs to be looked at. There was that new 28 Days Later. What was it called? The Bone Throne. And then the story comes out where some weirdo digs up an entire cemetery's worth of bones. I mean, it comes out concurrently. No, but I would suggest here that the real purpose of magic from the thelemic sense or in general, is essentially the recognition that there's a aspect to to consciousness, the soul, that is somewhat um, ignored by default, that it's latent, and that it needs to be elucidated, and it's brought out through initiation, induction into certain ideas, and these ideas are the things that are gate kept, because what they do is they reveal that the concept of the self as experienced through the ego is not the entirety of the being, but that it also entails, what we think of like intuition is, I think it's often not properly categorized as far as the source of it. And I think it's not even taken seriously enough or studied rigorously enough. It's confused with cognitive bias, but I think that it kind of is the key. The concept of intuition is the key here. If you fully delve into what it reveals to people, and I have many examples of my own, but I'm talking about the element of it where you gain some sort of direct knowledge that you couldn't possibly have perceived. It's outside of the range of your senses. Or precognitive. How does that work? And if this is a latent feature of the human mind, then I think that would explain quite a lot of the gatekeeping, because they want to keep it that way. Because if they shut off your intuition, then your bullshit detectors don't work. If you shut off your intuition, then when something is false and you sense it as such, you will have no reason to justify your sense of unease about the thing, and you're just going to have to trust it. So it allows you to gaslight. I mean, that's what they do, is they get you to gaslight they gaslight you every time they get you to deny your intuition. And if you tap into it, you're ungaslightable. And I take it very seriously for a few reasons. And I'm very curious about people who say they don't have souls, or they don't have intuition, or that this is all some kind of schizophrenia or something. It's like, or, I mean, on the other side of the spectrum, on the religious side, people say it's demonic. It's like, okay, well, that's a very convenient belief for you to have, because what I'm really talking about here is awareness and sentience outside of the ego, and outside of the physical body, like where the soul isn't fully incorporated into the flesh, where you're operating at a level of existence outside time space, and how that part of yourself isn't disconnected necessarily, but it's something that requires intentional alignment to incorporate it. This is called the great work in the thelemic context. The great work is the alignment with the quote higher self. And so it's just convenient that the religions of the world and the religious people will say that's demonic, that's evil. Yeah, of course, these institutions are there for your endarkenment, to get you to externalize anything higher than the ego, to keep you under control, to keep you in your meat suit so they can shame you about your human needs. I mean, that's what religions do. They mortify the flesh. You're just flesh, you're bad. You tap into something higher, oh, that's God, that's an angel, it's one of our things. Pay us. So the religions obviously have an incentive to cut you off of that. And so too does the dominant worldview and the scientific paradigm. It reduces you to what? An animal. And therefore, your self-awareness is just an expression of the perceptions of your physical animal body, which means the ego, nothing higher. And what I'm suggesting is that, yeah, it makes perfect sense. They would want to cut you off of anything and keep it to themselves. So the whole concept of thelema and this mystical or magical paradigm, which is, again, it's just the external trappings of what I think is a psychological process. Of course, they're going to gatekeep that for the same reason they would want to keep you illiterate, for the same reason they've rendered you visually illiterate, with regard to discerning real from fake, which we have a solution here. For that, we have a solution. But I mean, I'm saying it's likely to me that what I'm saying is true about the deliberate misrepresentation of the human mind, that deliberately obscuring certain elements to it. I think that's true, and the reason they're doing so, it's deeper gatekeeping than even media gatekeeping. I mean, this is just gaslighting on the level of, let's say, the Truman. Get back to Jim Carrey in the Truman Show. The only reason he was able to exist on that stage is he believed the lies of everyone around him. He didn't trust his intuition at first until he started noticing patterns. He started questioning his wife. She lies to his face. He was a victim of gaslighting. But once he tuned out of their lies and he listened to himself, he escapes. It's a very Gnostic story, by the way. Ed Harris being the demiurge. JRGMTY says all government programs are solutions to the problems they created. Yeah, exactly. And that was the point of Walter Lippmann's work. But what I'm pointing out here, though, is that these problems or these programs, anything that they create, yeah, I mean, it's safe to say. I mean, I use the term PSYOP entertainment complex because we're talking about government-controlled media, but also incorporating another number of entities and agencies to pull these things off. Capture the Loop says USA is essentially a hyper-real fascist corporate hydra. It's not just the USA, it's the whole world. This is a world system. It's a world state church. The history that I talk about, the manufactured history, is accepted ubiquitously. So there's going to be a history book, well, maybe not in print, but in 10 years, hypothetically, you have a history book. Everything you see in the fake news is going to be in there. That's the official record. So news is not there to inform, but it's to conform. It's conforming you to a prefabricated model. It's not informing you about reality. In fact, it's confusing you. The mainstream news consumer is misinformed by default. There's no other way. There's no mainstream news consumer who isn't misinformed, because that's what it is. It's misinformation simply predicated on the fact that it rests upon all of the previous fake history we've been talking about. So right off the bat, it's all misinformation. Those who don't watch the news or who tune out, they're not informed. They're just misinformed. Is that a better position? It depends. If you really don't care, yeah, it's great. Less stress. But if you do care and you just ignore it because you're so terrified, I don't know. Or if it makes you apathetic because you've just taken the black pill. So the black pill idea is that everything's terrible. We can't fix it. Just accept it. That's pretty dark, as opposed to it's fake. But the black pillars would rather accept their black pill than accept the good news that all this stuff isn't just real and to be taken for granted as unsolvable, but that no, these are hypothetical scenarios playing out in your head. To get back to the pathologizing of media analysis and pattern recognition, there is a trend that I'm just gonna completely ignore. I mean, I'm observing it, but I'm not going to engage with these people. There's a lot of these channels that are starting to talk about people, this perspective that when you see through the news, you're actually they call themselves schizos and autists, like autistic. So they associate pattern recognition and seeing through news as some kind of neurodivergence. Like I don't think there's any good reason to take that type of nomenclature. It looks to me like an intentional foot bullet. Sort of like people question media, question NASA. Now suddenly they're, quote, flat earthers. I mean, it's just a way of like, do you want to be defined in that way? I mean, if anything, the mainstream model puts the masses into a skits, a break with reality, a baseline insanity. So you have cognitive dissonance mainstreamed. And then here we are, from the outside perspective, cognitive harmony, having separated from that. I'm not defining this as crazy. We're not the ones overreacting to shadows on the wall. This is an oasis of sanity and objective. This is objectivism. What I'm espousing here is objectivism. Oh, nice. Eddie F says Atropia is available to stream today. It's a must watch. Yeah, I had today marked for something. Atropia. So Atropia is about this town full of crisis actors. It's a 24/7 war simulation. I'll have to watch that. Capture the Loop says schizo, normie, or psychopath. Yeah, okay, so I've been breaking down the point of views in the world stage as MSM, which is mainstream mediation, MSM plus, which are the subsets, the conspiracy theories, and then off-world stage, MSM minus, which means we're subtracting from the basic story, the basic premise established by the mainstream. So you do these broad categories. Then you have the programmed, which are, of course, the mainstream and alternative. And then you have the programmers. And so the programmers, the smaller group, or the various groups of individuals and entities that are involved in the program itself. But I wouldn't even say that they are deprogrammed. I don't think there's a deprogrammed class. The programmers are just programmed differently. And it's so compartmentalized. I don't think the big picture is freely disseminated to any individual. I think it's more the case that it's like a security clearance thing, need to know basis. But you can make these broad divisions that work as far as describing the model of how things work. So when I talk about the political horseshoe theory as being implemented as part of the model, yeah, that's true. So you have this worldview warfare with broad categories and subsets. And of course, the alternative just being the controlled opposition to the mainstream. But the problem is all of these various categories, they all operate within the same fictional universe. The deprogrammed is a new category. And to say you're deprogrammed, and not in a I'm awake, I'm a truther, I'm a red pillar, that's kind of a fake awakening. To say deprogrammed, you would have to identify the program. And no red pillar can do that. Because they have to separate real from fake, not just call everything fake because it's mainstream. Because what will happen is the people in alt media will not call their own side fake. So they have their own pet issues they're obsessed with. Like adrenochrome, Epstein Island, vaxes, and chemtrails. Like they will die on those hills. They're not even they're selectively skeptical, but they're pretty much uncritical of anything that comes from their own side. So their minds in the mind war have been taken out by friendly fire. 0 survivors. Trutherville is all mind war casualties. Yet they posture as though they're opposing the system, like they're the anti-establishment. That's why I'm anti-anti. Almost more vehemently than I'm anti-pro. JRG says, schizo is like a depressed Gnostic or something. I don't understand these labels. Yeah, I think what they're trying to do is perhaps further marginalize these ideas and get the individuals doing it to, like, self alienate, to feel like they're something divergent from the norm, to even notice these things. And I don't think it's the case. And I think it's also to create this conspiracy versus normie dialectic, to keep them um, essentially self isolating. These ideas do not need those types of labels, because, again, it's not even accurate. There's nothing special about somebody for noticing patterns. And I've demonstrated this for myself just by bringing these concepts up around people who have no familiarity with any of this. And in 5 or 10 minutes, I can explain the basic premise behind our manufactured history and the purpose of it, and the purpose of a one world. I guess, I mean, it is a one world religion for all intents and purposes, but synchronizing the masses in a singular paradigm that essentially supplants any religion. And no religion has ever been able to achieve this level of success. I mean, you can look at this objectively and see why there's some utility behind that. And it makes more sense than any of these conspiracy theories, which, again, are full of confusion and stories and superstitions. We've done a lot to demystify these things. But again, this is not black pill. Black pill is everything is bad. We can't change it, so just accept it. It's very pessimistic and nihilistic. The red pillars see themselves as info warriors trying to wake people up. And the people that they're trying to wake up, just laugh at them. But I am seeing this demon versus alien thing playing out. Capture the Loop says, labels are fun. I always like to hear what the new categories and genres are. Yeah, labels are necessary. I mean, if you can't, this is what Confucius said: the beginning of wisdom is the ability to call things by their right names. And what I'm talking about here are points of view. For example, if your point of view on everything agrees with Wikipedia or ChatGPT, then you have a mainstream mediated point of view. It's predictable. Nothing you say or opine about will deviate from that, whatever that filter does to your interpretation. The Trutherville, the conspiracy theory point of view, takes that perspective and inverts it or contradicts it or adds on to it, but it doesn't subtract from it. So they both agree that something happened. They just disagree on whose fault it was or who caused it. But both of them exist in the fictional universe where the thing happened. So these are, categories describing their points of view. Are you mainstream or mainstream plus? It's one or the other. The third position, which is ours, is mainstream minus, which means we look at the mainstream, and instead of adding on to it to fill in the holes or offer alternative explanations, we're questioning the fundamentals. Did it even happen? And more often than not, the answer is no. And then we keep track of the things that did not happen. And there's been a lot of things that did not happen. And if you look at these things cumulatively, you have to account for the effect it has on the worldview of today. Because if you're operating in the universe where all these fake events happened, and you and I are talking, and I'm existing in a universe where I know these things didn't happen, okay, we have two different points of view. And this is going to change how you interpret everything. And of course, the people who have the view that these things are real as advertised are greatly offended when you say that they're wrong. Depending on how married they are to this or that political belief or martyr story, one of the more sensitive topics is when you talk about fake shooting events. People are offended by this, and I'm like, I'm not sure if they're getting the point here, because like we're talking about atrocity propaganda. That's fundamentally what it is. And not believing in it is offensive to them for some reason, because they've accepted that these martyrs are real. But what I like to point out, in these instances, is that it's not just about we don't want to believe in it, or we're trying to preserve our right to own guns. The reason why we're saying these things aren't so is we have additional information. So additional facts caused us to disbelieve. So that makes us informed disbelievers. And so you weigh that against what the believers have, and they just have the headlines and the stories. So now it's it's a matter of what's something that you can stand on: informed disbelief or low information belief, accompanied by trust in media. Not just trust, but faith. But of course, churches don't like the non-believers, and the mainstream media church definitely has various ways of denigrating them. That's probably why they have Candace Owens out there saying all these wild things, because they want to make conspiracy theorists look crazy. And she's setting up the reputation of conspiracy theorists, as this pool of people with poor judgment who follow sensationalistic tabloid nonsense and will believe anything. And they've succeeded. I think what they've done, and I said this before, is they've rebooted the entire conspiracy subculture. They've recreated what they did after JFK's fake hoaxed assassination. But it's worked. It's brought a lot of people into the fold. And now all these people who got into the Candace Owens sphere because of Charlie Kirk are now being taught about satanic, blood drinking Luciferians running the world. So she's basically bringing out, and I called this out before. I said she's going to be essentially the next David Icke, and she's already eclipsed David Icke. She's more extreme than him. I think she's gone further, because he backed down. He backed down from reptilians, so we can't own that. If she calls out someone as being a reptilian, then she'll have surpassed David Icke. And I like Icke, but I think he's a controlled opposition shill plant. And I'm not trying to be offensive. I mean, I'm sure it's a great gig if your conscience is good with it. Going through 91 Oki says non-believing. Okay, wait, there's a couple categories here. Because when truthers or conspiracy theorists say that's fake, that's generally just a reactive accusation pointed at the mainstream. In other words, they're automatically calling mainstream fake. Automatically isn't skeptical. If it's automatic, it means you didn't take time to wait for things to unfold to gain more facts. So what defines our methodology here is skepticism, which implies a delay before you judge something real or fake. You wait for more facts. If you're not waiting for more facts when you call it fake, how do you call it fake? What is your basis? Shooting from the hip? So that's no better than assuming everything's real. So I would advise against automatically calling things fake. You have to qualify your claims. Now, even if you intuitively know it's fake, you still have to get the facts to support it before you can call it fake. It's very damaging to the reputation of media fakery analysts, as well as regular conspiracy theorists. I just to call things fake without reason. That's what I'd call, like straw manning the opposition. Why would you do a straw man, attack a weak version of the opposition, when you could set up the strongest version of their take on things and then go after that, deconstruct it? But the low information disbeliever, low information believer, they're lost. I like to be able to substantiate my claims. And it's also noise, because then people can stand up, raise their hand, and say, hey, that's fake, as though it's an insight. And you'll find that the big channels that are populating X, who are quick to jump on these things, uh, they get a lot of traction for being the first to call things fake in a very reflexive way. But they generally omit the fact that nobody died, or they'll add noise. The noise stuff is what I've been calling out as of late. Like the Gematria stuff is out of hand. So for people who don't know, Gematria refers to this system of adding up the numerical value of words and then ascribing meaning to them because of the number, and then they relate to other words with similar numbers. They make these connections. And we see this a lot on X, but that comes out of a practice that I think was used by rabbis when reading divinity into the Torah. So I wonder, what are these individuals with gematria calculators think they're actually doing? Like, what are they practicing here? They're treating the news media like the Torah, like some holy script, and they're using these gematria connections to imply what? They're implying the hand of divinity, of a simulation, or of some secret group of whoever uses gematria. In other words, it always kind of points to the same culprit. But I just see these individuals doing numerology, and I'm wondering, where did you learn that? It's kind of a culty in a way too. But this it's also something that you can only believe in if you ignore the fact that you're cherry picking from large data sets, ignoring things that don't fit. It's pretty much the Texas sharpshooter fallacy in every case. No predictive capability. But for some reason, that gets a lot of traction. When what we're bringing up here does, in fact, analyze patterns, sometimes numbers. And it shouldn't be mixed up with the mystification of patterns, which is what we commonly see. And of course, I think that kind of approach is popular because it's, well, I don't think it's organic. I think it's largely pushed by the shills or plants for the very purpose of obscuring the script, of obscuring what we're doing here, which is we're objectively analyzing these patterns, recognizing the synchronization between entertainment and pre-planned fake events. We're looking at systemic fakery. So we have to avoid the noise and the confusion that is all it's all inserted into the conversation specifically to hide the script. So the one successful conspiracy, the one real conspiracy, is the one that the conspiracy theorists all missed. And it's this one. The conspiracy to control time, to control all mankind through the deliberate creation of an internalizable Truman Show, a fabricated reality, a hyper reality in which fake has been merged with real. And then, of course, built around this is this sublimated civil war. This is the perpetual war that Orwell described. And the perpetual war is mind war. And it consists of many rigged alternate reality games. But what is this exactly? And that's really the question. So what it isn't, though, it isn't the matrix. It's not a simulation. It is a propaganda matrix. It is an internalized simulation. Big difference. It's a program superimposed over the real world. It's a series of historic events And it gives creative control to one subset of the human population, one small group at the top of the pyramid. And we know nothing, about the individuals at the very, very top, but you can get close, I suppose, if you start analyzing the metascriptors, those artists, musicians, directors who have directly or 1 degree content that specifically pertains to the Psy-War. When you get into those specific directors, writers, etc., you're pretty close to those who are manufacturing the history itself, who are wittingly accomplices in this. I mean, it's quite possible you could be a propaganda conduit and be used, your platform, that is, could be used for this purpose without being aware of it. That's why I pointed out that the programmed and the programmers are both still part of the same fake worldview. So the programmers are mostly programmed. They're only going to be let in on that particular department, which is relevant to their interests. I think we're being hit by a buffering. I want to say thanks again to all the supporters, commenters, listeners. I'll be going through Discord later tonight to catch up on things. I'm focusing on other projects quite a lot these days, but we will be getting into some kind of a regular routine. I do want to work on picking up a second phone for the purposes of phone calls, so we can resume open phones for open minds, because we're getting to the point, and this will be more true after I release the first installment of the Great Deconstruction. I think this is the time when we're going to start entertaining, or rather engaging, with the people on the world stage side of things. I think the open phones have always been very productive. And it's not really so much that we're trying to change minds, but we're more or less exploring ideas. And I think debate is very useful for the listeners more than the person that's being debated against, or who is affirming the reality of something we're calling fake. But it's very nuanced. You can see why people get caught up in these alternative storylines, like Erica Kirk being this villain. No, she's a made-for-TV character, even that. And that's to distract you from asking where Charlie's at. And I've seen a few people make some stabs in that direction, trying to say, well, maybe Charlie Kirk's not dead. But they don't get very far. They ask the question, but they don't say, well, if he isn't, then what? And if you start unpacking those questions, it is almost a direct line out, of their entire bubble. It's like, well, none of these conspiracy theories are true then. And then all these individuals have to be involved. These people that are involved are regulars on Fox. They know, they go on Tucker Carlson, and you see how these people who would have been directly involved with that psyop are platforms majorly. I mean, are they deceiving the world? Are they deceiving the networks? Are they, it just seems like, no, they're all part of the same cast of characters. They're all in on it. They're all in on it. Candace Owens knows Charlie Kirk's not dead. But getting back to the relationships between her, Erica, and Charlie, and how they all were in, I mean, we look at these relationships. So Charlie and Candace are texting back and forth over the years. Yeah, that's, like I said, these are part of an ongoing storyline that's played out over 13 years or something. Well, I think we could pretty much surmise the same thing for all these Epstein emails. That quite literally, these are all PSYOP scripts. These are emails meant to create the exact perceptions that they have created. And given the level of fakery, and this is like going back, like I said, at least 1963, we look at all these various fake events, simulated events, these fake characters on the world stage. Why are they so quick to believe the Epstein stuff is real? Gematria 101 says Candace was wearing a CIA hat after meeting Erica. Pretty obvious. Yeah, I think it's called the Candace's Investigation Agency. She was trying to be ironic and funny, but probably being literally accurate. I think her thing is fake too. I don't think Candace Owens, I mean, maybe she's legally married to that guy, but I think that marriage is as fake as the one between Erica and Charlie. I think her kids are fake too. Has anybody seen video or photo of Candace Owens pregnant? You know, no one could produce the same for Erica. So I guess it's safe to say that she doesn't have any kids. That would explain why she's always on YouTube. What's the evidence? By the way, what is the evidence that Candace Owens has actually had any children? When you apply the same standards, you find that these people are hypocrites. I mean, isn't Candace Owens being sued by the president of France? Well, the same people who say that he's a woman and that his wife's a man say Candace Owens is a man. It's very bizarre. Their whole worldview is bizarre. But here's the thing. So they have all these crazy beliefs in Trutherville. Many of these beliefs they can't substantiate, but they hold on to them for one reason or another. Sort of like with the demon thing. They just all believe in demons all of a sudden. So you have all these beliefs that are just tacitly accepted by this group. At what point do we just call it a religion? Trutherism is very much a religion. And it's kind of like this, mainstream alternative thing is very much like the church and the Catholics and Protestants. You have these similar dynamics built into it. And one final point here is that there's this triangulation built into the system between left and right, these competing paradigms. They're triangulated by central control over media with these psyops. So the people on these two sides react in predictable ways. It's like a tug of war. It's pretty obvious that the death of Renee Good would be applauded by the right and viewed as an egregious violation of human rights and should be a martyr to the left. So she can be a villain or a hero. She deserves it, or she's a victim of an oppressive system. Just depends on what side you're on. Some will justify it. Same with Derek Chauvin. I think Jack Posevic's trying to get Derek Chauvin out of jail. So on one side, they think Derek Chauvin's a hero. On the other side, he's a villain, and vice versa. They create these stories to play upon this built-in bifurcation in the world stage. Duet Celeste says, why don't they claim Epstein is a woman? You know what? It's weird when they don't. I'm like, to be consistent, aren't you supposed to assume that to be shouldn't you be making the case? I'm sure that one of these types they'll put a skull graphic over the face and they'll say, oh, that's a. In fact, you know what? I have heard this said. Thinking back, they really do claim it's all of them. And of course, there are others who will say, well, no, that these are AI. They never existed. It was all fake. Does it matter if they're all, CGI generated or not? Well, it's not that it doesn't matter, because yeah, it's plausible you can create fake people and fill in these roles. Sure, it's doable. But in these specific cases, nobody has been able to substantiate this. There's no evidence for it. So it comes down to, is that an informed opinion, or is that just a baseless assertion where you have an idea, a theory that everything's fake, but you can't prove it? If so, why would you be presenting that? Like, it's almost insulting. It's like you're being gaslit. You know, like I get it. It's fakeable. You can recreate these things, but does it mean these people don't exist in flesh and blood? Because if so, you have to contradict the existing evidence, or you look crazy or lazy. Which is it? Are you crazy for saying that, for example, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and John Benet Ramsey never existed? Or are you lazy because you haven't found the evidence that contradicts your theory? Because I've heard these claims, and I'm saying I think they're worth challenging or pushing back on, because all they do is muddy the waters. Like, oh, it's now okay to just make unsubstantiated claims and then push the burden of proof on everyone else. And for what reason? We dealt with this with there's someone who used to make these claims about this celebrity is also this celebrity. And I'm like, well, let's hear the voices then. Let's see some video. Let's see some birth dates. They just do it off of one photo. And I'm saying that's not enough information to make that claim. Or the people who say pandas never existed. It's not a serious claim. If you really thought that was true and you were clout chasing, you wanted clicks, you want to go viral, you want the attention, why wouldn't you go prove it to be so? No, it's just an internet claim. I think people just want to be entertained. You know, the doom scrolling, it shows you it's just a habit. They need the hits. And if you're willing to go spout some nonsense and provide that dopamine or whatever, then I guess there's a market for it. Gematria 101 says the veil is from V317 flipped. Oh, I see that. Yeah, I remember talking about Butler 713. Yeah, you kind of have the word lie built into it. Someone called me a psychopath for saying that Trump used theatrical blood and that nobody died in Butler and that Charlie Kirk was squibbed and is now living his life somewhere happily. Like, how does that make me a psychopath? Because I'm not reacting emotionally to these things? I mean, what exactly about it? Because these things, again, these are what I'd call contemporary myths. These staged events are a collectively agreed upon set of lies that frame our discourse day by day. It's the current things that spread with or without the TV screen, the black mirror, the phone. You'll get it through word of mouth. People will spread these mind viruses to you, whether you want them or not. I think it's rather incredible to see how something proliferates so rapidly. They must have filled some need we have to convey relevant info. And emergencies or crises tend to sell very well. But it's like super compulsive. It's got to be some kind of mind control or a hijacking. I guess it's a hijacking of a natural inclination. You know, you have your neighbor over you used to have neighbors you talk to, but the people you interact with day to day, maybe it used to be fewer people, but now you have the internet, so you're connected to everything, and there's really no way to be isolated from this stuff. You can't really quarantine from this stuff. You can try, but I think the instant you get in contact with somebody, they will somehow just pass it on to you. It's kind of like that movie Hot Skulls, where mind viruses create such a problem that the government mandates earplugs. And if you see somebody talking, not wearing earplugs, you got to throw your earplugs in because you don't want to catch what they're spreading. But I'm not bothered by it, since what I'm catching from people, I'm mind war inoculated. I don't get infected by it. Like, I know these things are essentially just rumors, fabrications, and stories. So it doesn't work on me. But imagine if it did. And I think I can recall several times where I did hear something in such a way, and it did have a response in me. Not the response of, oh, I want to look at this event because I want to see if it's, I want to analyze it objectively and see if it's even real. But I remember I used to be more reactive. I heard about the Boston bombing as I walked into the apartments where I lived. I heard two neighbors talking loudly right there in the courtyard, describing what had just happened. And I'd never seen that before. It was like, okay, they felt the need to be the town crier. Gematria 101 says, in the magnetic field, the interpretation of the numbers. Okay, well, I don't discount what you're saying necessarily, but what I'm pointing out is Gematria, as it's used by truthers, is some made-up methodology that used to be used for the Torah, but now they're misapplying it. And the implication is that these numerical connections reveal a divine hand. And I'm saying, no, it reveals cognitive bias and cherry picking and a divine fallacy. What's up, Clockwork 113? Yep, we're back. I was doing some field research and working on consolidating my publishable manuscripts. I want to see what can I actually get done here in the shortest amount of time, what's closest. So I have one that's somewhat related to what we talk about here, at least what we've talked about recently. I have a book on synchronicity. And I had it ready to publish last September, but I got distracted by Charlie Kirk and then other things, which only helps because I've spent more time writing on the topic, discussing it, refining it. But I think I'm going to put some work into that one. And I have a couple other ones that have nothing to do with this. And I don't know what name I'm going to use. Gematria 1 says, you have no clue. I've studied the... Look, okay, you can be a Gematria person. I don't care. I'm just saying, I think it's bullshit when people say, this event connects to this because of this number. Like, I'm sorry, but that's a connection, sure. But is it a intentional connection? I doubt it. And also, the premise of it being a connection and being intentional assumes that the people doing the psyops are somehow employing Hebrew numerology or gematria, which I think is just a sly way of blaming Israel again. It always points to the same thing. Unless you can show me where gematria connections aren't the result of Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Like, please show me. And if you're using more than one gematria calculator to make your connections, then I'm already just saying no. I'm not a mystic. I think that there's a lot of obfuscation and mysticism inculcated into what we consume, so we don't arrive at clarity. We don't need gematria calculators to notice the correlations between government-controlled entertainment and government-controlled news. We're looking at propaganda. We don't need to insert mysticism into this. And if you're going to, I'd say prove it. I mean, have you made any predictions? Like when people say it's 6 months and 66 days and 66 hours between this event and that event. I'm like, who said that number or repeating digits has special significance or has any sort of predictive capability. Henrik, thank you. Received handbook for the recently deprogrammed yesterday. Did I include some PSYOP trading cards? Lean Dion says, cherry picking ciphers. I'll go with the reverse English ordinal for this one. Right. Well, all it does is it says, hey, look, every one of these fake events has gematria or this numerology on it, and it's just a way to blame the culprits that they chose without saying it directly. But what I'm pointing out here is that yes, you can make connections in the scriptures or in the news by using gematria calculators. Easy. This is just a numbers game. Just find the hits, ignore the misses. You can manufacture connections. You can look what happened 33 days from this date and this event, and then you could try to make connections. Yeah, you can make these connections, but what it implies is that these connections are so impossible, man could not have done it. I used to always hear that. No, even this is funny. Even with predictive programming analysis, before we really started I think, making the connections with concurrent programming, we were just analyzing the data. And at that time, it was like people would say, these connections are too complicated. Man could not have done this. It has to be the simulation. We had to purge the simulation people from the conversation because they were arguing from incredulity. Like, this is so complicated or so intricate, man could not have done it. Well, you're making the assumption that these are real connections, and they are impossible. But they're not real. You're imposing it. So there are coincidences. There's a difference between a regular coincidence and an engineered coincidence. And these are too complicated to have been engineered, so that it rules out the premise that this is merely government controlled media, which is what they want. Instead of looking at the PSYOP entertainment complex, you're looking for evidences of the supernatural, whether it be simulations or sorcerers or demons or whatever it is. It's anything to distract from the essential facts. Thank you very much, Henrik. Appreciate the support. Now, I have studied or looked into, and in fact, the first book I read on Gematria was called 777 and Other Kabbalistic Writings by Aleister Crowley. I read that probably when I was still in high school. And what they do is they use Gematria and also these correspondence charts where they show Mars corresponds to red, to the number 4, to the metal iron, to Aries, and to the, I think it's Tyr, the Norse god. And then they go through these various gods that all connect to the same. So they show these cores like Venus, copper, associated with the color green, and these goddesses. And down the line, they have this system of cataloging symbols. And along with this is the gematria. Now, why is this? It's because they believe in their symbolic system, this language, that they can construct rituals that have more efficacy the more symbol dense it is, the more information dense it is, the more they can encode into it with overlapping corresponding archetypes, symbols, etc. So, for example, they will do a spell to a particular deity at an hour that corresponds to its associated planet. They will use the colors and the metals or some kind of objects representative of that. So it's all about correspondences because of their idea of Hermetic magic, as above, so below. The idea is that the altar, the ritual chamber, is a microcosm. And so to tap into the macro, you find these corresponding elements that tap into these broader ideas or forces, and you put them on your altar. And you align these things with whatever particular thing you're focused on. Well, to know or to understand all the things you should include, you would consult his correspondences. And then you would write your spells in such a way that they add up through Gematria to numbers that correspond or are harmonious with the rest of the ceremony. So they do encode their spells using Gematria, sure. In fact, I think Aleister Crowley even spelled his name a certain way. I've seen an example. Oh, that's right. Even with their goddess Babylon, they changed the spelling of Babylon to make it add up to 156. Why? I don't know. I mean, I do know. It's they proactively encoded this thing because they believed that you can use Gematria to symbolically harmonize everything. So it's all about establishing this coherent or this cohesion between their symbols, this alignment. So that's how it's used in practice. But then the truthers come along and they have this entirely new application for it. And I always thought it was kind of strange to see these Christian truthers engaging in what is effectively an occult practice. And they're using it erroneously, so they're not even extrapolating any useful data. Nothing predictable. But it does add this spooky element. Like, oh, look, the bad guys are using Kabbalistic magic, which again feeds right into the right wing, far right, specifically conspiracy theorist, red pill architecture, where you have to have this universal scapegoat central to their worldview. They don't exist without that scapegoat. Same thing on the left. So, I've said before, it's critical race theory versus critical Israel theory. The two factions, the two sides that are being triangulated against one another are each centered around a certain scapegoat, which is fundamental to their entire worldview, which is based on an oppressed and oppressors. And the oppressed have to get out from under it by exposing it once they've become woke to it. So J-pill means woke to the universal oppressor. Yes. And it's not a new story. Blood libel, QAnon, Epstein. Epstein's just the newest iteration of what is fundamentally a story. And they need these stories. These stories maintain the integrity of their simulation. And you can look at how these two basic frameworks are consistently reiterated by big psyops that provide all the evidence that particular side needs to justify their stance. So you can look at the recent ICE stuff as justification for maintaining the framework from the left's perspective on things. Like for them, it shows, yes, you do have the oppressed and the oppressor, and we've identified the oppressor and systemic racism, etc. And this is all reiterated by the psyops that surround the initial one. So you have Renee Good, then you have the interaction with the right wing and the left, people taking sides with ICE protesters. This all reaffirms their entire paradigm. So the right similarly has events that reaffirm their paradigm. They watch the Grammy Awards. What do they see? Satanic music performances. They watch the Super Bowl and the halftime show. Oh, there it is. It's an anti-ICE message, and it's got these satanic ritualistic underpinnings. So again, it reiterates their side. And this is, again, the purpose of the PSYOP entertainment complex. It's maintaining not just a worldview, but a bifurcated worldview. And that split is the result of triangulation, which never ends. The political horseshoe is described as such because even though it looks like the two fringes do come around and resemble each other like a circle, they don't actually touch like a horseshoe. And this is the infrastructure. This is the design. It doesn't change. There's no unification left and right. These are mutually exclusive worldviews. And the reason why these psyops are so exaggerated, unbelievable, is because they are appealing to extremes. They're emphasizing the difference. This is a tug of war. And there's no way to reconcile the two. They, like you would think, okay, well, the far left protests against Israel. The far right hates Israel. Don't they agree? The enemy of my enemy is my friend? No. They've made it so they don't agree. And they've made these things this way by design. There's a number of reasons they don't unite on this. They have different reasons for the opposition. You know, the far right thinks that the state of Israel is, of course, controlling America, and it's against Western civilization. It's subversive to Western civilization. That's their basic perspective. Whereas the far left is against Western civilization. And so then you get into the other elements where there's different reasons for the opposition that has to do with the far right on this white genocide theory or the white replacement theory, which makes them focused around, of course, what I'd call ethno-fascism. It gets ugly to a certain point, but I mean, of course it would. It's all about the hive mind. But they get into these categories that are so antagonistic that they can't merge, even if they have some commonalities. Like, you're not going to find an environmentalist who cares about chemtrails. You're not going to find a chemtrail enthusiast who cares about climate change. They have different definitions for the same thing, but they can't agree. You don't see Greta screaming, "How dare you," at the airplanes. Well, they kind of do now, and this is a new development. They do now, but that's because they say condensation trails reflect the sunlight. But regardless, these are mutually exclusive categories by design. The people who love aliens don't believe that they're demons, or the people who believe in angels are inclined to see aliens as demons. I mean, they can't agree on anything. It's by design. I have a few articles on this in The Schism in Everything, which is something I published a little while ago. And we're just showing, like, for example, the left, feminism, the right, toxic masculinity, and how they have these guns versus needles, these dialectics where one side is, anti-gun, pro-needle, the other side is pro-needle, anti-gun. And you get into the symbolism of it, and it ties into this active, passive, masculine, feminine, open, closed, which has to do with one's relationship to government. Like, left is very open and porous to government, right is closed. Left is open borders, right is closed borders. Left is open skin, vax me. Right is closed skin, don't vax me. But as you go down the line, you see that these categories run deep, and these are likely the result of a deep understanding of our psychology of groupthink and how to play upon tribalism and ingrained, probably instinctual fears. Weaponized anthropology, I think, is what you would call it. I was doing some research into Margaret Mead and her husband, Dr. Gregory Bateson, who's a very significant figure in MK Ultra. But they describe the process of infiltrating primitive societies, mimicking their culture, blending in, and how you could control the many if you were just a small group, if you could put your influence agents among the mass. Kenley says, greetings, Tim. Was this gifted membership from you? If so, very kind. Yeah, that was gifted by somebody in the chat. I think it might have been Big Hair Tsunami. So again, thanks to the generous support of these other listeners, you keep this thing going and you bring more people into the Blue Wrench, Blue Shield. And I will be creating more members only content. I started working on Conspiracy Better. I just got that one started. Someone had said, I'm on the fence about whether chemtrails are real on this one, Tim. Can you be on the fence as to whether the sky is blue or whether water is wet? I mean, can you be on the fence about whether birds fly? Is that you can't claim to not believe some certain things. I mean, you could say, I don't believe in the sun. That's not a valid, you can't just you can't be taken seriously unless you can overturn or explain away what the status quo has already somewhat established. Not the status quo means it's real, but it means there's something there that you have to push back against. But can you be on the fence about it? Well, okay, it's a cold day. You go outside, you breathe, you see vapor. Well, we know the cause of it. It has to do with the warmth and the interaction with warm air and the cold and condensation. Like, it's pretty well understood how that works. Similarly, with hot jet exhaust, it's pretty well understood what happens with hot air up in the frozen stratosphere. So hot jet exhaust, it's moist, it's got water in it. It is naturally going to condense and likely freeze. And these frozen drops look like cirrus clouds. Like, that's not up for debate. You can't be on the fence about that. You can say you're on the fence, but it's as ridiculous as saying you're on the fence as to whether or not water is wet. That's reality denialism. Like, you don't get to claim that. I don't believe you. You're lying to yourself. Like, that's absurd. But anyway, that would also be, I guess, an argument from ignorance, which isn't valid in today's world. I mean, you might not like AI, but Perplexity and others, they don't tell you what to think, but they will give you adequate sources. But I've dealt with that. Anyway, thank you very much, Henrik. Appreciate the support. 20 new Wrench members. Joe Mama, Travis Cloud, Marcel, Nicholas, Crazy Man, Yeti Life, Austin Murphy, Oswaldo, Delusional Ismist, Armitage, A. Kane, Brian YT, Anthony, Daniel Jett, Texas Goat Radio, Blap That Kneecap, Shadow and Light, Crone, Jesus Cow, Big Hair Tsunami himself has received one. Thank you. As I said earlier, I will be jumping into Discord later. I was taking a break, doing some field research. Again, I did manage to socialize with normies for several days, and the conversation started with me bringing up the anniversary of Mad Mike's final launch, and it opened up a lot of conversations. And I think a lot of people are aware of the need to be skeptical and might even be alarmed at how they've underestimated or perhaps underappreciated the need for it. And I'm not trying to change minds yet, but I'm just curious as to how reachable people are, if this is properly explained concisely, and at what point do people feel challenged. And it seems like this entire area of discourse has been contaminated by Epstein and Owens and Charlie Kirk, likely by design, because if they can flood the zone with thousands of conspiracy theories, they can occult the actual conspiracy. And I think that's the strategy. I call it the meta conspiracy. The meta conspiracy is you flood the zone with a bunch of conspiracies so they aren't able to see the actual structure of this thing. It's a pretty strong tactic, the mudding of the waters. So when I refer to the Gematria stuff or the simulation stuff, that's mudding the waters. And look, if you're into, Ouija boards and tarot and numerology and Gematria, like, I'm not really opposed to that. But I'm just asking, what does it have to do with media analysis? Like, why not do tarot card readings? If you're going to do Gematria, numerology, to quote, decode the news, then start using tarot. Let's see what cards we draw out and how this relates to the news. Maybe do a pendulum, burn some sage, get your crystals, maybe chant a mantra. Is there a mantra that you could chant? I mean, what I'm saying is, like, if you're going to go into mystifying the news, go all the way. Go full shaman, full blown shaman, like the QAnon shaman. He was way into that stuff, and look where he got. He was the tip of the spear with his animal skins, his roadkill outfit, running into the Capitol. Like that guy was so moronic. Jake Chansley, is that his name? He happened to be 33 years old, not a coincidence, but that foolishness was on full display. He was the face of MAGA that day. He was the face of conspiracy theorists. He had a sign, Q sent me. But if you listen to any of his interviews leading up to it, he was talking about how Tesla's technology is going to change the world. Med beds, we're going to live forever. We're moving into the fifth dimension. We just got to believe. He's still out there grifting, trying to sell t-shirts. Like, who wants that merch? And he didn't spend 27 months in jail. He went to some acting camp. He went to some training in the FBI. Whatever he went wherever they send their actors when they're getting their roles upgraded. Because this guy came back as a more coherent David Icke. He definitely came back with conspiracy claptrap. He went from one to the other. What's up, propaganda sucks? Thanks for joining. But the Q shaman's he's the very definition of a plant. He's put there to be the face of the organization to make them look crazy. No coincidence, he's the one who sat in Nancy Pelosi's chair and did some kind of prayer to cleanse it. And again, this was January 6, 2021. Staged riots. That's another consideration here. You got to look at the Woo's News breakdown of the event. It was a staged riot. Nobody died. So what does it say about the cast of characters egging the thing on? Alex Jones, Nick Fuentes, Q Shaman, actors. Owen Schroyer, actor. Did he spend any time in jail? No. Although he broke away from InfoWars for some reason. Now he sounds essentially like Alex Jones. Not even Alex Jones light. He still uses the same catchphrases. Like, he never really established his own personality. He's always just been a wannabe Alex Jones. But I'm just looking at this as, okay, this guy's a plant and had been from the beginning. Anybody who's been on InfoWars is questionable. Like literally anybody. I can't think of anybody who's been on InfoWars who isn't quite obviously a plant. I mean, changed my mind. Jake and Jelly says he would do guided meditations in his spaces, taking the group to different planets in space. So the Q shaman could take you on a ride to Jupiter in your mind in a guided meditation. That's great. That's just what we need. It makes sense though. The people who are looking deepest, who are looking the hardest, who are really trying to see through this thing, have these plants in place to make sure that they're led down some ludicrous trail where they never get back. Lose them. Make them lose their minds. There's no reason to be confused. I'm unconfused. If you can separate real from fake, not just in the moment calling things fake, I'm talking about if you can separate the two timelines, real, fake, you are not confused. If you can't, you're confused. And most people are confused. They don't know they exist in a state of confusion because that's the consensus. And this isn't hard to grasp if you look at it like on a micro. For example, we can all agree that Scientologists are confused. I mean, are we in agreement about this? And of course, they'll say that's bigotry. It's like, well, no, you are. This applies to everybody, all religions. They love to throw that word out there so their critics feel bad. But I don't feel bad for criticizing a space cult. But if you buy into this, it's safe to say you're fundamentally confused. The same goes for almost any other. I guess it depends on how seriously you take it. I guess this would only apply to the literalists. I just assume Scientologists are literalists about the books to the letter. But not all religious people take it literally. Some will examine it in different ways. It's just symbolic or whatever. It's just allegory. But if you believe these things literally and you can't prove them, it's safe to say you do exist in a state of, somewhat mild confusion. Depending. If you're Q shaman level, you're full blown psychosis, full confusion, confused, lost. 91 Oki says religions are dumb. I would describe them as I'd like to say primitive attempts at philosophy, but no, they're not even that, because these aren't operating systems. These aren't methods for acquiring knowledge. These aren't methodologies. They're in fact belief systems. So belief systems in general are, I think, constraint. They're, when we're talking about like religions, etc. These are worldviews that I think make people more manageable and controllable, and serve other functions as well. The mainstream religion, science, or scientism rather, because science isn't a belief system, but the mainstream paradigm is supposedly based in science, but there are elements where it's been infused with science fiction, so it's divorced from actual science. But that view reduces man to ape. It cuts you off of anything higher. And I think religions do the same thing. They reduce you to your fleshly meat suit and condemn you for it. And there's the idea that this is somehow in the direction of spirituality, but I think it kind of veers away from that, and in fact steers people into ignorance or encourages ignorance about a full understanding of the mind, and where certain aspects of the mind might have been externalized as being something else, the universe or God. They've screwed with our operating systems, I think, by design. You know, I listen to these podcasts all the time, and I hear ones today. I gotta change it when they say this stuff. Like, nothing exists until you see it, and you collapse the wave particles, like the double slit experiment. I'm like, that's not what the double slit experiment actually says. But I get these other ones where people say, well, you put it out there in the universe, and the universe will show you something, or the universe will do something for you. And that line of thinking, I think, is part of the divorcing of the individual from the universe and creating the separation between cause and effect, when cause is possibly from, as I said earlier, the incorporeal aspect of self, what Carl Jung called the transpersonal. But we don't have an adequate framework. And I think it's premature to say we fully understand the mind. And if we look at modern psychology, psychiatry, I think that it's built on a model which presumes that we are soulless. There isn't a way to accommodate the existence of extraneous consciousness, that the body is it. William Morgan, 33, says, auto hoax or quick hack. If you have a news app with a search bar, just type 33 to get the daily psyop or a message they're trying to push. You know, I have Google News alerts, and I do get all the 33s. And it's funny because we're not cherry picking here. You know, we are not excluding the misses. We're just noticing that certain numbers do happen to attend fake events, to the point where you can pretty much look at these things as internal code, hoax code, but there are consistencies that are worth looking at. Adamski says, I retweeted your original observance of visual unawareness. Well, okay, speaking of, when it comes to like visual literacy, etc., we have the solution here. So the masses have been rendered visually illiterate. They cannot tell real from fake when it comes on the news. They just can't tell. And the conspiracy theorists can't tell anymore either. They can call it fake, but they can't say why. So I've introduced the concept of the blind folded skeptic. And the idea here is that you should be able to determine whether something's real or fake without having to resort to the visual evidence, which relies there on some kind of mistake or a glitch. Well, we can't assume they're always going to make mistakes. They're always going to screw up or have a crisis actor smile at the wrong time. And as they introduce more of this generative AI, they perfect it, you're not going to be able to see through it reliably. So you need another way to deconstruct fake events. So our approach here is to take a methodology which involves suspending judgment, getting more facts, including hoax indicators, concurrent predictive programming, deviations from standard operation procedures when it comes to the scene itself. There are anomalies that would be included with these hoax indicators. So you get all these hoax, and another big one is always the immediately implemented political agenda. So you have these hoax indicators that, when taken together, can give you a pretty good idea as to whether something is fake or not. And you can make this case that these things wouldn't be there if it was real. And you can make these statements without having to point to the screen. It's not necessary. And again, to call something on TV fake is not an insight. It's not useful. Not unless it's backed by more information and reasoning behind your assertion. Because otherwise it becomes an opinion. Looks fake to me, must be fake. Well, this person looks like they're CGI to me. What's your expertise? What's your special qualification for making that? Because that becomes an appeal to authority, an appeal to incredulity. Like, I'm incredulous because based on my authority, it's fake. Well, what's your authority? I suggest replacing incredulity with skepticism. The difference being one acquires more facts, the other relies on a personal feeling or a whim. And this is not a whim. This is not a feeling. It's not mere opinion. I don't offer myself here as an expert on telling what's real or fake by looking at it. And I'm not arguing for my expertise. I'm providing reasons for the things that I say. And you can refute those reasons. Sure, I'm open to it. Prove me wrong. It'll save me time. Wrong answers waste time. I'm not here to waste time. I don't like being wrong. I don't seek to be. And if I am, I don't seek to hide it. Like all the people who know they're pushing red pill propaganda that I've debunked, and they know who they are. I mean, that's kind of a thing to confront here. Sooner or later, there are many things that we have already debunked. We have reasons for calling certain things fake, and some people are still pushing those narratives because it makes them money, it gets clicks, it appeals to their audience. But how much longer is that going to be a sustainable business model? If your business model requires that you keep promulgating truth or orthodoxies that we've debunked, if that's your basis for doing it, consider the effects on your business model when what I'm describing here becomes irrefutable. When your subscribers recognize that you're actually pushing government bullshit, that you are effectively controlled opposition, useful stooges, and you're selling it. I'm not selling agitprop. I'm not selling psyop warfare. I'm contradicting it. I'm confronting it as what it is. But it's safer, I guess, it's safer to go with the hive or the alt hive. There's safety in numbers, I guess, security. You know, someone said to me, you know, you'd be doing a lot better at this financially if you were just pandering a little bit on a few of these, you know, make some room for some Epstein and some chemtrails, maybe throw some bones to the Q folk, do a little gematria. And I'm like, no. The reason why I don't is that, I mean, if I was solely in this for the money, even at this stage, I wouldn't see that as practical because that's not going to last forever. We are subverting the alternative media built-in paradigm by doing this. And the numbers aren't on our side yet, and they may never be in their entirety, but a large swath of the more discerning constituents of Truthville are going to be jumping ship. And so that will also affect the subscribership and the financial viability of spreading agitprop for a living. We're not yet unignorable. We have been before. If you followed the history of this channel, starting with, I mean, when we started this channel with the billboard thing and then the Daredevil and the various things we were doing, this concept was being, the ideas we were promulgating were being increasingly difficult to ignore. And to me, that's pretty much fait accompli. It's just a matter of time. There's been no effective challenge to the alt media paradigm. It just has subsets and subsets, boxes within boxes, but no one has organized outside of the big box to confront it from that perspective, because the alternative media has always been given the label truther, which has this built-in assumption that mainstream is lying, we're telling the truth. It's clever, you know, but no, it's actually the case that truthers are just alt lie. It's the lie world order. It's a worldview built on agreed upon myths, lies, and fake history. And the only people who don't participate in that agreement are those who have identified the program, identified the world stage model, and opted out. But as I said earlier, you can't opt out. You can't fully step out until you can actually delineate between the two timelines and recognize their convergence through psyops in the mainstream news cycles every day. I'm making this easier. It won't be long. I've been working on this project. We've been working on this project for some time, but I've been field testing it. Can I take these concepts and ideas and just throw them out there? Breach a protocol. I'm always like, don't try to convert the normies. Focus on recruiting those in alt media who are somewhat deprogrammed. Don't waste your time on normies. Well, I don't think they're unreachable. I happen to find that I think normies in general are more open to debate and to actually trying to get to the substance of it. Whereas the alternative types have already made up their minds and they just automatically reject it. Like, I don't want to hear your theory about our fabricated history because it contradicts my very entertaining stories about adrenochrome vampires and UFO demons and Trump as savior. Like to get here, you have to be apolitical. I mean, they do have some great stories on the world stage. Everyone here is probably entertained on some level by the Kirk saga soap opera. But again, this is bread and circuses as a model for global governance. Let's see what else we have going on. Lean Dion says the Epstein files. Yeah, Epsteinology. It's a variant of trutherism. It's a sect in that religion, but it's rapidly becoming dominant. And you look at the crowdsourced research, the hive mind of alt media, trying to figure out Epstein. Look, they were fed all this stuff. And I use the word fed advisedly. You have people like Ian Carroll, like, hey guys, I made this AI thing that will help you sort through Epstein files easier. So you have all these people, it's busy work for truthers. This is an alternate reality game by design. It gets you engaged, makes you controllable. So I called this a rigged ARG, a rigged alternate reality game. And that's what we're watching. So they're all playing this game, investing their time, their energy, their emotion, virtue signaling about how they're so concerned, but not doing anything about it. Except for that one guy that went over to Mar-a-Lago and got shot. Kind of reminds me of the guy who shot up the Comet Pizza. It's like they try to create this idea that there's this outrage and that someone's going to act, and that might be part of the objective here as well. Radicalizing people against the deep state, so they do crazy stuff. I mean, they've been doing this for years. '91 Oki says normies are normalizing. Well, when I say normies, I really refer to people who aren't plugged in, and so they take the default mainstream mediated perspective on everything. They haven't lost their trust in the mainstream view yet, if at all. That would be Normieville. Trutherville is disenchanted with the mainstream and they went elsewhere. And there's this massive cul-de-sac called Trutherville. And they're like, oh, I have arrived. I got the real truth now. When you're in a subset, because you didn't go far enough from the mainstream to include in your perspective the systemic lying and the fakery and the manipulated history that your point of view still rests upon. So normie, truther, yeah, it's a distinction without a real difference from this perspective. But the main distinction here is that the MSM plus, the subsets, are a little more active, more agitated, whereas the normies are a little detached. They're detached, but they're still plugged into the baseline assumption that it's all real. So they're just more comfortable in the Truman Show. They haven't noticed any discrepancies to give them the cognitive dissonance. They're dreaming. Blue pill is dream, red pill is nightmare. Neither are awake. The only people who can rightfully claim to be awake are the auto hoaxers, the media Gnostics, which points to one final point here. I said final point an hour ago because I thought I was ending at hour 2. One final point, media Gnosticism is a term I kind of coined because we're describing a difference between believers and knowers. So believers follow the sources that are approved. Knowers seek additional information and replace belief, which requires trust in these sources, with direct knowledge. And if you can't find the direct knowledge to support the belief, what do? You become an informed disbeliever. So knower or believer, which one are you? And so the mainstream news consumers don't recognize that they are merely believers. They think they're getting knowledge. It's like, I'm sorry, but that screen is not a sensory apparatus. It's not like a third eye. If you look at the screen and whatever's on there is real, it's not a mode of perception. So anyway, we also got into the Truman thing because Jim Carrey has a lot of facial surgery done, Botox injections or whatnot, and people are saying it doesn't look like him. I thought he looked kind of like that comedian Theo Vaughn. I mean, he does look different than he did 8 years ago, and people are like, oh my god, 8 years. I mean, that kind of flies in the face of the whole adrenochrome thing. When people say adrenochrome makes you, it's like the fountain of youth or something, preserves your youth. I don't know. Have you seen any of the people you've accused? They seem to be, aging naturally or unnaturally in predictable ways. But yeah, my contention here is that if they were going to put a fake Jim Carrey out there, they would have used somebody in a Jim Carrey mask. Not a mask that doesn't look like Jim Carrey, but it looks like Jim Carrey with some Botox. So again, I think the idea that he's a clone or wearing a mask is kind of ridiculous. Could it be true? It's fakeable. It could just be more of this mudding of the waters, distraction, confusion. So this is another thing too. They give you something confusing. Yeah, they could have used AI face on face tech and made it perfect. They give you confusing things so you remain confused. No way of knowing. And that might even be the point. Oh, there's no way we can know. And I say that, what I strive for here is the informed disbeliever to know things, not to give up because nothing can be known. That approach is a sort of nihilism in a way. JDMZRX says Beau Biden is playing Jim Carrey. Lee Dion says, is it the lighting or contact lenses, different color eyes seemingly? I'll have to wait and see. I want to listen, watch video. A lot of people have been confused by focal lengths. The camera's focal length, your proximity to it. There are a number of things that can alter the face significantly. But if you go down that road, people say, well, it's because he was speaking out against the Illuminati, so they killed him. And then, or because his ex-girlfriend was killed and he was going to be blamed, so he had to choose to join the dark side. I'm seeing all these theories about why he got replaced. Again, we're back to this area of truthers espousing things that are diagnosable as, so like if you want to make them look crazy, this is the type of stuff. Like you promote the idea that there's some kind of facial blindness, ridiculous claims. And I've seen some ridiculous ones today. I think there was this guy, Fit Flat Earther. He trends for these things. And he says, this person is that person. And some of the ones that I've seen have just been so outlandish. Oh, yeah, that's right. He said, Keanu Reeves is Jim Carrey. Like, I'm sorry, but that's the kind of stuff that people in padded cells say. I've seen these ones where it's like, okay, you're either, and even if these things were true, if you thought they were true, you would need to provide more angles, video, more context. Because there is something that happens here when you have two faces next to each other, where if you look at them under the assumption that could be the same person, it's not hard to see, like from one to the other. It's the same process, I think, that lets us perceive animation as one continuous object moving instead of disparate pictures. Like we kind of fill in the gaps. Now, yeah, exactly, Sync Kid. Dallas Goldbug back in the day. Well, Dallas Goldbug would claim that these various celebrities or politicians were all royalty, who were then getting cosmetic surgery and becoming celebrities in America and rulers in America. I mean, it was based on this idea, though, that there was some kind of radical cosmetic surgery, and they could tell who was who by looking at the veins on the hands and ear biometrics. We don't see that much anymore. Now it's all about skull and hip to skull shape, hip to shoulder ratio, and if your ring finger is longer than your index finger. And phrenology, I think, is making a comeback. Or how they, I mean, there are so many different things that they bring up today, but again, these are I don't think these are any more considered. These are no more serious than like transvestigation or reptilian investigation. And they're certainly not serious attempts to get to the truth. Like you're not going to find the truth by going through these muddied waters. It's not there. That's the meta conspiracy. Endless rabbit trails. No resolution. There are still people today want to talk about who killed JFK. Still talking about these old conspiracy theories because there's never resolution. You think this Epstein thing is going to end? Oh, Epstein disclosure, it's finally happening. 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. They've been hyping this for so long. And I think what they'll do is they'll tire everybody out. Epstein fatigue will afflict even the Epsteinologists. And then we're going to talk about something else for a few months or years. And then J.D. Vance is going to run for president with Erica Kirk as VP. And then the Epstein files are going to drop again. They've already pulled Erica Kirk into that. So the Epstein files also shows how the people who don't trust the mainstream will trust government propaganda if it's served to them differently. Like in a clever, so they feel like they're clever investigators. Like, oh, leaked docs, you can investigate. Like they're investigating a crime scene, finding truth. It's really such a clever ruse, and it's never going to end. People are still wondering, did Lee Harvey Oswald did it? You see, no resolution. You know, I recently saw Woody Harrelson on X. He was trending for something about we need to take out Donald Trump in some way. We need to get rid of Donald Trump. And I remember his dad was allegedly involved in the Kennedy assassination, or at least was considered to be a suspect. But he was already in prison. I think he was in prison for killing a judge or something. But I thought it was interesting that Woody Harrelson, having that in his background, thought it was appropriate to suggest that Trump needs to be removed. As though people aren't reading between the lines. It's like a celebrity endorsed act. 91 Oki says Jackie killed Kennedy. Like Erica killed Charlie. And I know Erica was there were some elements of Jackie and Erica's presentation. I think what Jackie did is she pulled the wire on the squib device. And then she crawled over the back of the vehicle because the canister was rolling off the back. I don't know, but it was certainly not, it wasn't a real shooting. Well, you know who shot Kennedy? It wasn't Oswald. It was Stanley Kubrick. And I have reasons for saying so. We have plenty of reasons. The Kubrick stuff is also interesting because Stanley Kubrick's one of the more prolific metascriptors, probably since the Nolan brothers. I mean, he's got predictive programming for every major 20th century hoax psyop. I mean, even extending into 2020. We're talking about Stanley Kubrick. And there's this whole subset of truthers who are obsessed with Stanley Kubrick. And they sort of get into this area of almost making it seem like he's the only one, that he's like not a whistleblower, but he's like a major, he is the only metascriptor they're aware of. Like, it's like, well, this is actually every major director seems to have some type of connection. Look at John Frankenheimer, friends with the Kennedys, directly involved with RFK's death. He drove him to the hotel, but also he did the Manchurian Candidate in '62. So we have many directors to consider, but I see this Kubrick rabbit hole, and a lot of people focus on Apollo 11. Oh, like he was, and Eyes Wide Shut more recently. Well, the reason why Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut is being looked at in this context is likely because he's always had this role in providing content for the conspiracy theorists, as in his work has always been introducing these things. Like, for example, Dr. Strangelove had the fluoride in the water, the Apollo 11 stuff in The Shining. And so for the Eyes Wide Shut to have these Epstein-like elements to it makes perfect sense. Capture the Loop says, I dare say Stanley directed Epstein. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we're what I'm suggesting here. One of them. I mean, one of the other elements of the Epstein thing, I think here is that he was like blowing the whistle on how the elite really work. That's why they killed him. But the whole thing about the Eyes Wide Shut, of course, is that the parents are both somehow now being brought into this. Their daughters being sold to the cult. I've seen all these interpretations of it, which seems like people are reading a lot into it, which they tend to do. There's been a lot of people, a lot of work done into deconstructing The Shining and how it references Apollo 11, but the same documentary seemed to miss that The Shining also foreshadows 9/11 in highly significant ways. Capture the Loop says he primed the minds of the masses. Well, yeah, look, in all likelihood, he directed the JFK assassination. One of the biggest conspiracy theories out there is who killed Kennedy. Second to that would be the moon landing. Well, look who directed that. So he's got his fingerprints over the big conspiracy narratives. So it would make sense that Epstein Island would just be another, what I'd call constructed mythology. Government constructed mythology. They can fake take down skyscrapers with fake terror attacks using controlled demolition and special effects. How hard would it be to fake the idea that the elite have all been blackmailed on some weird island? Like, that's not that hard. What is history but an amalgamation of stories? And we're just looking at the work of the storytellers who generate our history through fake events. And when I said Charlie Kirk's thing was planned in the mid-90s, that's not a stretch. Consider 9/11. You could probably, by examining what we can, what the evidence would suggest, the predictive programming going back to 1968, 33 years in the making. Before the towers were built, that was the plan. With these big psyops that shape the big world paradigm and turn it in a different direction, with these large ones, I think it's pretty safe to say decades in the making. I mean, I sometimes point out the Pentagon breaking ground on 9/11, 1941, 60 years. Pentagon, 77 feet tall. And that's the height. Flight 77 flew for 77 minutes and hit the Pentagon. And that low-level flight was also foreshadowed in Doctor Strangelove. Yeah, good one. Capture the loops. The monolith as Hilton Hotel. So ground zero, the scene of devastation, is in this picture, and then you look up and you see the big black monolith, which is 100% based on 2001 Space Odyssey. Well, if you look at 2001 Space Odyssey, when they excavate the monolith on the moon, it looks like ground zero. Well, what does that all mean? My interpretation of it is that the monolith is the movie screen, the television screen, your iPhone screen, which itself is the Overton window. That is what sets the parameters for the reality you will accept. And the 2001 Space Odyssey was about the Odyssey, our journey through space to Saturn. In the movie, it was Jupiter, but the book, it's Saturn. Well, Saturn is the material, the matrix, the materialistic view of man, soulless. But it's also the one world view. The monolith is monolithic. It's like a new monotheism. It's the singular worldview that all of the screens share. Despite the internal diversity of opinion, we all have the same frame. That's the monolithic worldview, the one world. And 2001 Space Odyssey shows this journey of man merging with the monolith, becomes a star child. Well, I think that's all symbolic of our merging of real and fake. In the beginning of the movie, the very iconic scene has the monolith with the sun and the moon eclipsing over it. And while the sun would represent the news, the real world, that which is shown by the light. The moon represents the darkness of the movie theater, the subconscious, the dream world, the fiction. So sun and moon combined represents the merging of real and fake. And what have they achieved with the monolith? What is the monolith? Well, the monolithic worldview is the one which is infused with fake, what you could call a hyper reality. Lasers go pew pew says, I want to go back to when I couldn't unknow this. I'm not sure what that means exactly. Because look, you're better off knowing and being informed than being misinformed or under misinformed. Ignorance is not bliss. Knowledge is power. That's definitely true in this case. Because believing this stuff is disempowering. It makes you a loose cow. Yeah, Laser say I might have taken the blue pill and failed. Well, it's too late. But I mean, what do you exactly know? The red pillars have an excuse to say, I wish I didn't know what I know now. Because what they're given is so horrible. But the deprogrammed perspective eliminates a lot of these fake, terrible things. So then that's what I'm saying. Ignorance isn't really bliss in this case. Because you only have so many F's to give in a day. And I don't give any about any of this fake stuff. I mean, I'm analyzing it, but like, it's not detrimental to my sanity, my mental health. But I'm very philosophical about this. I'm not an activist. But at the same time, I'm not just, passively sitting by. I'm actively engaging with this in the sense that I'm trying to understand it. But the reason we're doing this is that we're not running in circles like hamsters caught in a wheel. We're not doing the whole current thing like truthers, mainstreamers. We're not loose cows in this. There's actually some progress we've made here. Henrik had said something about the book, Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed, A Skeptic's Guide to the Theater of Psywar, is about 300 pages or so of our best observations and an explanation of our methodology when it comes to media consumption. And this is built up over time, and it's been refined. And our understanding today is much deeper than it was 3 years ago. We've eclipsed truthers. We've reverse engineered and pretty much eliminated all the false explanations, the muddy water stuff that we always talk about, the stuff that's usually taken up this conversation. We've demystified psyops. We tested it. The blood's all theatrical. So anyone still overreacting to fake events is just looking archaic at this stage. And I used to get these people screeching at me on the phone. Why aren't you overreacting like me? You can't call everything fake. Frothing at the mouth. Why are you so calm? It's like the people who shame you for not voting. Like, shame on you for not being in a tizzy. And now I can see that is the objective of conspiracy theories. The more engaged you get, the more unhinged you get. They want you to be reactive and emotional. Because you know what happens when you're reactive and emotional? You're not thinking. You're running for the hills. You're warning the village there's a wolf. Clockwork says Jake Awake has a new video up with Jim Carrey being replaced. He touches on hyper-realistic masks. I first heard about these masks from you and Cam B. Well, I heard about them from Jonah Mendez, a CIA director, which is revealing how this technology had been classified. And I was talking about it because it seemed like as soon as digital deepfakes were being introduced, these other synthetic ones had been revealed. And I was like, wait, the implications of this previous version include we've already been deep faked. They've been simulating people forever. And it's as simple as disguise technology. It's not digital, or wasn't then. But Cam B would call and he would say he had some great insight. Person A is person B. Just look, bro. Trust me, bro. And I was like, I need more. Can you give me some more evidence, more camera angles? Let me work with this. And I realized then that you can't really be really tolerant of claims that are pretty extreme, that don't have some kind of extraordinary evidence to go with it. You can't trust someone just saying, just look, bro, because that becomes gaslighting. When they're telling you what you perceive isn't real, trust me. Oki says, I wish I knew this shit when I was a kid. I don't think it would have been possible. Would not have been possible. The limited hangout operation Sandy Hook let the crisis actor thing out of the bag in a very controlled way. But prior to that, you would not have had enough information to have even guessed at how fake things are. Lean Dion says they want them all cry raging like AJ. Yes, exactly. Alex Jones has cried so many times. Rage crying, overreacting, histrionic. What's the point of that? It's to sell the story. Like, if you knew how bad it is, you would be freaking out too. And also to create this stereotype, I think, that to be a truther is to be angry. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. If you're not cry raging, you're not paying attention. Like, you lose the moral high ground. You don't care enough. You're apathetic if you're not super mad, ready to fight, ready to run up Capitol, just run up to the Capitol and overthrow the government. You're so mad. Or you're so scared you're digging a bunker and ordering storable food items and preparing to eat your neighbors if things get bad. I think putting you into a chronic fight or flight could easily be part of it. It's always World War III, but when that gets kind of tiresome, it becomes Civil War. It's about to be Civil War. That gets boring, or we get tired of it. They say, "Oh, it's about to be climate change, Armageddon," and they just cycle through doomsdays. And the doomsdays really do keep you in the now. And if you're stuck in the now, you're not paying attention to the engineered future and the confused history, the fake history. Adamski says you can become accustomed to digital images if you've been doing that for years. Well, yeah, you could. I mean, I had been for years editing, special effects. I mean, I was really into digital art. And I did apply that to my analysis of the space station. However, that skill set, or the ability to determine that there's an error with a particular bit of footage, that's not going to be useful in the near future. It's actually not useful anymore. So I had this experiment I wanted to do where you would have a video editing expert examine a sequence of video clips. And you tell him or them, get a group of them, checkbox A or B, real or fake, for the following clips. So you go through these things, and I could probably set this up but I would have to get participants. And you would see, can the experts tell real from fake just looking at isolated clips? And you would give them a combination of actual ISS feeds and AI generated stuff and science fiction stuff from the movies. And I'd be curious to know if they would identify the glitches and the errors and the terrible special effects and the NASA stuff, and possibly misidentify the AI stuff as real. Like, I want to know how compromised, how visually illiterate even video experts are. And I think they'd be dumbfounded to find that when they're not told it's coming from NASA, that they see it as fake. Because I think it's very incongruent for somebody who is a trained video editor to look at some of that slop from NASA and claim to believe it's real. It's like you have to suspend disbelief. You have to actually not see it in some way. I mean, I recall, and this was when I was years into editing, I recall going to a friend's house and they had a big screen TV and it was the ISS footage. And they were all sitting there spellbound, looking at the screen. And I remember thinking, why does it look like computer graphics? But I did not even for 1 second think it's fake. I just looked at that. I just looked at it and said, it looks like computer graphics. But I just assumed there was an explanation. I didn't even question it. And again, this was like right at the time I was heavily involved in video editing. And I have some other things as well when it comes to the ISS. Some other approaches. Like, I've noticed some areas where, and the damage is done. Like, they can't go back and correct the stuff that we've noticed. And I haven't given it a lot of attention as of late. But it's not like it's going to change. They can't change the fact that they've screwed up on some very essential aspects to it. 91 Okie says, I went to film school. If you've been to film school, then you should be insulted by the garbage they've given us. The science fiction stuff in particular. I'm talking about NASA science fiction. And even if you don't think it's fake, at a very minimum, you have to recognize that you cannot reality test this specific body of content from these specific agencies. Because we used to have this thing where I noticed there were some people who would call news on the ground fake, but all the space news is real. And it's like, it's the same entities. It's the same production above and below. The green screen exists at all levels, even above the Kármán line. But just because it's fake, or just because we find it questionable, doesn't mean you can say, oh, you are therefore saying you live on a pizza with a dome over it. That's not what we're saying, nor could you extrapolate that from what we're saying. Because the very minimum you can say is that whatever the Earth is, what they're showing us is some kind of a fabrication, altered, some kind of a obfuscation. Laser says, dude, there's this video. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Girl astronaut doesn't know what a bolt and wrench is. It's so fake. They're mimicking fixing stuff without it, without taking a wrench to the nut properly. Yeah, I saw that. That one was hilarious. I saw that today. When they're out on the spacewalks, and you have the view of the astronaut, where it's like the astronaut's point of view. They'll take a wrench and they'll tap on a screw. They'll grab one of those loose cords and they'll flap it. You'll just see them like touching the thing and trying to make it look like they're actually fixing it, like children at play. It's like they're playing. They're not actually doing anything. They're not doing real work. And somebody finally calls it out. But one of the things to note here is that when they're on spacewalks, there's this, and it's more pronounced when there's something docking. You'll see that there's this way that behind the astronaut, the light doesn't go very far. Like, what I mean is, it goes dark after like, I don't know, 30 feet, 50 feet. It doesn't go that far. Yet, when you see photographs of the Earth from the ISS, you can see details on the Earth below. So I'm like, there's some discrepancy here between the photographs and the video. What does that mean? Well, I was comparing NASA's spacewalk video and capsule docking videos and the lighting to the lighting of night scuba divers. So you're underwater 40 feet, scuba diving, looking for manta rays or something. You're down there and you have your lights underwater. Well, the light only goes so far. There's light loss. It's diffused because of the water. So what I'm saying is that the spacewalks in some points appear to be done underwater, as do the capsules docking on the ISS. And there is that neutral buoyancy lab where such things are done regularly in simulation. So spacewalks are likely simulated underwater. Doesn't mean the whole ISS is underwater, but there's a scale model of it underwater for spacewalks. But the lighting gives it away. Lean Dion says, what dexterity would they have in those suits with those huge gloves anyway? Oh, yeah. Well, the space station thing is really, to me, it's the Achilles heel, because they can't undo the bad evidence no matter what they do in the future. They've already given it away. And I think we have a solid grasp on that. And there's so many bloopers. There are hours and hours of blooper reels if you're interested in looking into it, which we will at some point. My priority right now, I mean, that is something to get into, though, is the space odyssey itself, the script, the storyline of man becoming multiplanetary. Now it's changed where Musk doesn't want to go to Mars. He wants a moon base because Mars is hard. But my point is that our constructed history includes contemporary myths, these fake events, martyrs, but also miracles. The landing on the moon for the World State Church is a miracle. This event, with the most iconic, I think, statement of all time, the one giant leap for mankind, that event synchronized everybody on Earth. We're now in the same fictional universe. It made it real. But yeah, there were plenty of glitches. And when it comes to the space station, I would be convinced if certain things were there that just aren't there. There are some things that would prove it to be true or prove it to be in space that they just can't do. But it's one of these things where even if you can tell, even if there are clear giveaways, the believers will just reject what you say. We had that instance where I think it was one of the astronauts had flipped upside down and he had this bulging vein on his forehead. It was like red. His face is tomato red and he's got a bulging vein. What does that tell you? Tells you that he's upside down and that gravity is pulling all the blood to his head. But why is there that kind of, how does that work? I mean, I thought he was in space. So you show this to the truthers. I'm sorry, the truthers show this to the NASA believers. Like, you share these videos and they'll just say they don't see it. His face isn't swelling. And I got into this long Twitter thread for weeks with someone who was just fighting me on this. And it's like, look, you get the forehead, vein bulge. His face looks fatter. Like he's obviously upside down. So it becomes this debate over, um, just basically, it doesn't look fake to me. It looks fake to me. It doesn't. It just goes back and forth. You cannot convince the true believers. Lasers Go Pew says, yes, the Earth ain't flat. It's 10,000 times bigger. But from what I can conclude from my beach experiments, it's flat. Where's the curve is a valid question. Well, that was one of the primary things that I think just kind of showed us how reliant you are on trust, because you've never seen the curve. And most people who say they have, this also shows you how quickly people will lie to defend their beliefs. Like Jimmy Kimmel, I can see the curve from my backyard looking at the beach. I can see the curve looking at the ocean. Or they'll say, I saw a curve, I was in the airplane. I was looking out the window. And these are just reflexive lies, perhaps even false memories from watching so much science fiction, playing so many video games with space themes, all the movies or cartoons where it's, there's so many ways that you're consistently reminded of it, being curved and being a ball. Well, you can accept it based on what you've been shown in the computer models they've shown you, but you can't claim to know it. You can only claim to believe. I believe in curve. Okay. Well, I cannot claim to have seen the curve of the Earth. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, well, I got to get back in time to go through Discord. Tomorrow's Infinite Plane Saturn Day. I appreciate all the channel support. We're in the process of acquiring a phone system. Lasers Go Pew Pew says the real snipers don't really calculate for the Coriolis effect. Tucker Carlson said, because he talks about the splatter topic, he said, when he goes hunting, he accounts for the curve of the Earth when the deer are very far away. But he talked about it as going over the curve, not the Coriolis effect, where the Earth is rotating, moving the thing laterally. I was pointing out after Butler, I'm surprised they didn't make the shooter a flat earther. They could have said the only reason he missed is that he was a flat earther and he didn't believe the Earth rotates. So he didn't account for the Coriolis effect. And Trump actually was rotated out of the path of the bullet. Thank you, Capture the Loops. Ribo Nation says Jim Carrey looks like Val Kilmer now. Oh, Val Kilmer, who died on April Fool's 2025. Oh, no. I thought he does. I've seen that. He also looks like Mickey Rooney. He also looks like Theo Von. He also looks like Jim Carrey with Botox. But it is strange, weird, and ironic and entertaining because we're talking about the guy from The Mask. We're talking about a guy who's been kind of ingrained into the conspiracy counterculture, which is all government manufactured, and the guy who is believed to be the man behind the Joe Biden mask. But yeah, it does look very weird. And he even said something kind of weird. Like last time he was being interviewed, he said, I don't exist. And he gave some mystical explanation for how nobody exists or something. And then this time he's like, something about, I saw the people out there. I'm like, I'm dead. So you do get this weird duper's delight element kind of built into it. So I will give him credit for this. I will say this of the truthers. There is a there. They are reacting to something. But the question is it bait? Is it a red herring? Because whatever it is, it was meant for you to see. If they really did replace him in some weird way, they would have used a mask that looks like him, as you recall, so there wouldn't be any discrepancy, so you wouldn't be going viral about it on X. You know, like these people say, oh, this person's wearing a mask. I can see the line on the neck. You really think they're going to have this very expensive piece of technology, this super sophisticated mask to fool you, and they're going to leave open the bottom of the neck? You're going to see the seams in it. But it all adds to the confusion, which is I think the purpose of it. It's an active measure against the critical thinkers. But that's what we're reaching for, the critical thinkers who are caught up in this meta conspiracy of all these fake, misleading storylines. A lot of them might eventually be able to see that they're being played. But again, it's like an onion. There's so many layers. Like Erica Kirk's backstory. They're like, oh, look what we found. Yeah, they wanted you to find it because it's fake. The truth is even worse than that, you know, in a way. Well, I'm sure we'll find out more by tomorrow about Jim Carrey. I think even TMZ is covering this. Adamski says, just showing the tech, leave mistakes for the confusion. Well, you do have these things they call limited hangouts where they will reveal some things in order to attract the attention of the noticers and then put them in a box with a bunch of wrong information and discredit them. And then you have the IP addresses of everybody who possesses the tendency to notice patterns. So you're kind of being honeypotted in a way. Big Brother knows who you are. Laser says time is the great revealer. Yeah, exactly. And you're not obligated to believe things as they're reported, because then you react as though they are true. You can suspend disbelief. You know, it's perfectly acceptable to say, I'm not going to come to a full committed conclusion about the shape of the world until 2030. Like, you can put it off and no one can shame you for it. You can say you're just gathering more info. You can be somewhat agnostic, but you have to be an informed agnostic. You can't just claim not to believe. You have to have substantive doubt. And who here can argue that the media is something that should be doubted fundamentally, because they have a history of lying, a history of news bending. And I'm going to demonstrate that, as we have been, but I'm going to demonstrate it in a upcoming project that's going to be released in a few installments, The Great Deconstruction, a history of news bending, 1963 to 2026. I've been putting a lot of work into this project, which is used to systematize our research so we can do something with it. At the very least, it will be foundational to the off-world stage perspective as we start building this, what I've been calling for some time, this parallel media. We need to have a parallel timeline, and we build on it. And this is inclusive of media fakery, but alongside the real timeline. It'll make the deprogramming process go a lot easier and faster for those who are trying to escape the duopoly. Laser says, I've been studying Gnostic texts like crazy. Yeah, I think it's fascinating stuff. I think there is a very strong analogy with the world stage, off-world stage, and the Gnostic paradigm, and the media gnostic. You know, it's like being of the world versus being not of the world. You have this idea of you can be on it but not of it. You can recognize the fundamental illusion but still coexist in it. But it does require making the distinction between knowing and believing, and seeking versus sitting there complacently and being spoon-fed, or worse, being spoon-fed planted evidence and planted narratives, thinking you've made it out of the box. This Jim Carrey thing, though, could be a planned distraction and confusion. It's more likely that than it being a complete nothing burger. But I think the idea of these things being replaced, I'm pretty sure that's something that's planted there to make people look crazy. Because that would constitute, in any other context, a delusion. If you read about the symptomology of, schizophrenics, psychotics, persistent delusions, one persistent delusion people have is conflating the identity of someone with somebody else, and then not seeing the contradictory nature of it, and it indicates some deeper disturbance. And so it's not coincidental, I don't think, that many conclusions that conspiracy theorists are led to would lead them into a padded cell. If they were, looked at in a clinical setting. And again, I'm not confused. I don't advocate confusion. We've been doing the best we can to navigate the muddy waters. And it's clear to me that this is intentional. This is a deluge of disinfo, deliberately to make you confused, unable to arrive at truth. They pack in so much news every news cycle that you couldn't parse it all. You don't have the time in the day to go story by story. The only way you can arrive at the discernment between real and fake is to have a system, to have a methodology. So you don't have to go through every single story. But it's designed to overwhelm you, so you necessarily outsource. I remember Mark Cuban was crying about the blue check on Twitter being up for sale for anybody. He said, if anybody can buy a blue check, I won't know who to follow. I'll be lost. So that just speaks to the dependency. And it is a very dependent relationship. When you're solely reliant on some media entity to go through everything for you because you don't have the time. All right, going through comments. All right, we'll be back. Infinite Planes Saturday, likely same time tomorrow. I'm going to catch up on Discord. But as I said before, I'm focusing on bringing several manuscripts into fruition. And so my time is mostly spent on that. But we should be here in the evenings. And I'll be in Discord as I can. Right now, I am heavily focused on the first installment of this History of Newsbending project, which you'll hear about here in a couple of days. The planned release date is March 1st. It's a PDF. I linked to it on my profile. And that's just the first part, and it's going to be an ongoing project. But the plan is to plot out fakery on a timeline, a chronology of hoaxes, deconstruct world stage characters, and then, of course, monuments and narratives. But it's going to be very useful, especially when we put it in the hands of an AI agent, so we can extrapolate further information, connections, and really reveal here again that there's this systemic fakery. It's built into the system, and we're all experiencing what can be really described as a worldview monopoly. We're all looking through Big Brother's viewfinder. All right. Have